Chapter 1238. When Ji Tianqing flipped to the last few pages of the ancient book, his eyes lit up. The contents of these pages were related to how to deal with the blood god's illusions. He read word by word and quickly understood how to deal with the blood god's illusions. The blood god's illusions were a special kind of demon. They did not have a physical body, but they could devour blood and souls to grow stronger. Therefore, the blood god's illusions were very difficult to deal with. It was almost impossible to kill them with normal martial arts techniques. The fastest and most effective way to kill the blood god's illusions was to set up a heaven and earth array, stir up the wind and clouds, and activate the sacred power of lightning. The blood god's illusions were extremely and evil demons, while lightning was extremely young and strong. It was the perfect counter to the blood god's illusions. Of course, ordinary masters and martial arts masters could not control the power of lightning. Although this method was fast and effective, it was difficult to execute, but it was better than nothing. Another way to kill the blood god's illusions was to suppress them in the 5 extreme heavenly flames array and use the power of the 5 extreme heavenly flames to burn and purify them. This process was very slow and usually took 49 days to complete. Of course, the most difficult part was how to suppress the blood god's illusions in the array. This required a lot of effort from the martial artists. Other than these 2 methods, the ancient book also recorded 2 other methods to deal with the blood god's illusions. However, these 2 methods could only be done by saint and god state masters. For Ji Tianqing, these 2 methods were illusory and could not even understand them. Soon, he finished reading the 4th ancient book. He closed the ancient book and let out a sigh of relief. A gratified smile appeared on his face. Fortunately, I came to the Heavenly Book Pavilion in time to check the information and learned about the blood god's illusions. If I went to the Tianchuan Plain, even if I found the blood god's illusions, would not be able to do anything. Ordinary martial artists can't control lightning and can't do anything to the blood god's illusions. However, I am different. My thunder spiritual eyes can definitely kill the blood god's illusions. After muttering to himself, he put the 4 ancient books back on the shelf and got up to leave the Heavenly Book Pavilion. After a while, his divine soul left Kenshin's tomb and returned to his body. He walked out of the secret room and walked around the peaceful Soil City Lord Manor to visit Yun Yao and the Jinshan King. After a few days of recuperation, Yun Yao's injuries had recovered to 80%. She would be fully recovered soon. The Golden Mountain King was still in a deep sleep, and his divine soul was still recovering. Thus, Ji Tianqing left the sword world with peace of mind. Shua! With a flash of light, he flew out of the broken sword and appeared beside Xiaofan. Xiaofan was galloping high up in the sky. He had been flying for 10 hours straight. Seeing Ji Tianqing appear, he quickly returned the broken sword with both hands and asked with concern, "Tianqing, how's your investigation going? Have you found any clues?" Ji Tianqing accepted the broken sword and nodded. "Don't worry, I've already found the information about the blood god and found a way to counter it." Xiaohan's eyes lit up when he heard this. He said excitedly, "That's great. Then we'll be able to find the blood god soon and eliminate it." Ji Tianqing was also looking forward to it. He nodded and said, "I hope we can save the people in time and not cause a disaster." Then, the 2 of them stopped talking and hurried on with all their might. After another 10 hours, the 2 of them finally crossed thousands of mountains and rivers and entered the Tianchuan Plain. The Tianchuan Plain was one of the largest plains in the eastern continent. It had a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles. On this vast plain, there were boundless green grasslands and dark green forests everywhere. At the same time, there were dozens of cities and hundreds of villages on the Tianchuan Plain. Tens of millions of people lived there. So far, the poisonous plague had only spread to the coastal cities. It had not spread to the Tianchuan Plain yet. The 4 refugee camps set up by Xiaofan were at the edge of the plain. They were tens of thousands of miles apart. After the two of them entered the Tianshuan plain, they rushed to the first refugee camp, the A camp. After an hour, the two of them arrived in the sky above the A camp. Ji Tianqing stood high up in the sky and looked down. He saw that there were tents and mud huts everywhere on the grassland within a radius of 200 miles. Thousands of tents were like mushrooms, densely arranged on the grassland. Each tent could accommodate hundreds of people. The thousands of tents could accommodate hundreds of thousands of people temporarily. In addition to the tents, there were thousands of mud huts built around the perimeter. They were built by the soldiers of the Eastwood Army who dug up mud from the grassland. Around the refugee camp, there were tens of thousands of elite soldiers guarding it. There were also dozens of large formations set up by the Divine Origin stage experts to protect the entire camp. Millions of people who were suffering from the plague stayed in the tents and mud huts in low spirits. They relied on their meager living materials to support themselves. Fortunately, there was no poisonous plague in the refugee camp. There were also no strange movements in the surrounding area. Seeing this, Xiaofan and Ji Tianqing breathed a sigh of relief. Ji Tianqing stood high up in the sky and released the power of his soul to investigate the surrounding situation. Xiaofan landed in the refugee camp and gathered a few generals of the Eastwood Army. He cautioned them carefully. Half an hour later, the two of them left the refugee camp and quickly rushed to the second refugee camp, the B camp. The B camp was 40,000 miles away. It was located near a lush forest. When the two of them arrived, Ji Tianqing saw rows of wooden huts on the grassland in a radius of 200 miles. The structure of the wooden huts was simple, but they could accommodate dozens of people temporarily. The soldiers of the East Forest Army had cut down the trees in the forest and hurriedly built them with the materials they had gathered nearby. There were more than 8,000 wooden huts, which could accommodate more than 700,000 people. In addition to the wooden huts, there were many tents on the grassland. A large number of people lived in them. Ji Tianqing and Xiaofan were in the sky, observing the situation of the refugee camp. They used their soul to search for the aura of the demon clan. At this time, two Heaven Origin stage powerhouses in armor and carrying swords rushed over from afar. Ji Tianqing glanced at them and recognized them as the generals of the Eastwood Army. However, the two generals were running with all their might. Their faces were full of panic and worry. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing and Xiaofan had a bad premonition. They hurried to meet them and blocked their way. The two generals were running in a hurry. They were about to scold someone when they were suddenly stopped. However, when they saw that it was Xiaofan, they panted with relief as if they had seen their savior. They anxiously reported the situation. "Greetings, Divine General. Divine General, you came at the right time. We are the generals of the C camp. Just now, a large amount of black gas suddenly appeared outside the camp. Many birds and beasts died and turned into blood and bones. Divine General, a poisonous plague is about to break out in the C camp. Please go and take a look." Hearing this, Xiaohan's face suddenly changed. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Chapter 1239. The appearance of the poisonous plague indicated the arrival of the blood god Sun. Ji Tianqing and Xiaofan were excited and expectant, but more than that, they were filled with murderous intent. Xiaofan stared at the two generals with sharp eyes and asked sternly, "The two of you escaped in such a hurry. Did you care about the soldiers and the people in the camp?" The two generals were intimidated by his sternness. They immediately lowered their heads and reported in fear and trepidation, "General, you misunderstood us. We were not running away in fear. General, we were ordered by General Li to come to the second camp to report the news to prevent the poisonous plague from spreading and affecting the second camp. General Li is leading all the soldiers to protect and evacuate the people in the camp." Hearing their words, Xiaofan was slightly relieved. He quickly ordered, go to the second camp and report the news. I will go to the third camp now. After that, he rushed to the third camp with Ji Tianqing. The two brigadier generals bowed and hurriedly turned and flew toward the refugee camp not far away. 4 hours later, Ji Tianqing and Xiaofan arrived at the third camp. The refugee camp was located on a dry grassland. Not far away, there was a vast forest. There were tents and wooden houses everywhere on the grassland within a radius of 200 miles. Millions of people were living in them. When they were still a few hundred miles away, Ji Tianqing could already see that the ground below was filled with groups of commoners. There were more than 800,000 people densely packed together. They flowed across the grassland like a tide and rushed toward them. Around the crowd, there were tens of thousands of East Forest soldiers in armor and swords. They were protecting the people closely. In the sky, there were 8 generals and generals in the sky origin stage. They were guarding the people vigilantly. Obviously, the poisonous plague had broken out outside the second camp. Everyone fled the refugee camp in a panic and ran toward the depths of the Tianshuan plain. A few hundred miles ahead, the second camp was located. The sky was filled with black fog and demonic qi. It was already covered by the poisonous plague. Seeing this scene, Xiaofan temporarily breathed a sigh of relief. At the very least, the civilians had escaped from the refugee camp and temporarily escaped the range of the poisonous plague. However, Ji Tianqing's expression became very serious. He had a bad premonition in his heart. This is bad. The demons have always been cunning and treacherous. I'm afraid this is their scheme. When Xiaofan heard his words, his expression immediately changed. He hurriedly asked, Tianqing, what's wrong? Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows and explained with a solemn face, a deadly plague has broken out in the 3rd Battalion, forcing all the soldiers and civilians to evacuate. However, the highly toxic plague that filled the sky would rapidly spread and soon overtake the hundreds of thousands of commoners. In addition, I suspect that this was done on purpose by the demons. The poisonous plague that they released before was just to force everyone to leave the refugee camp. Now, hundreds of thousands of civilians were running through the grasslands with almost no defense or protection. If the demons release a highly toxic plague at this time, it will be a bloody disaster. Xiaohan's expression changed. He nodded and said, that's right. Tianqing, what you said is very reasonable. However, the highly toxic plague has already enveloped the 3rd Battalion. The civilians can only run. Fortunately, we arrived in time. There shouldn't be any problems. As he said that, he flew towards the vast and mighty crowd. However, at this moment, a disturbance suddenly broke out in the crowd that was as crowded as the tide. Several wisps of highly toxic black plague qi exploded like a mushroom cloud and quickly enveloped most of the crowd. The black qi rolled and covered the sky. Hundreds of thousands of civilians were crowded together and moved very slowly. Even when they saw the black qi erupting, they did not have time to avoid it. Moreover, the wisps of black qi exploded from different places and enveloped most of the crowd in the blink of an eye. Instantly, earth-shattering screams erupted from the crowd. They were howls of fear and despair. The rolling sound waves were like muffled thunder, rolling violently in the sky above the grasslands. Tens of thousands of weak civilians struggled and fell in the poisonous black qi. They lay on the grasslands, rolling and twitching in pain. Then, in just a few breaths, their bodies festered and turned into pools of blood, leaving only white bones. The boundless black qi covered the sky, causing the area within a radius of 200 miles to be dark. As the poisonous black gas spread out, the hundreds of thousands of civilians fell to the ground one after another like wheat being cut. Seeing this scene, Xiaofan, Ji Tianqing, and the many soldiers of the Eastern Forest Army were so angry that their eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. They roared into the sky. Ah! Damned demons, I will kill you all. Xiaofan roared angrily and rushed toward the crowd with a murderous aura. He originally thought that he could protect the civilians by arriving at the 3rd Battalion in time. However, he never thought that the demons would release a highly toxic plague right under his nose and kill hundreds of thousands of civilians. At this moment, he was extremely angry. His body and mind were somewhat crazed by the monstrous killing intent. Of course, when the highly toxic plague broke out, he had already seen it clearly. The people who released the highly toxic plague were elite demon kings disguised as civilians. They all held the purple demonic gourd. He recklessly rushed into the crowd and brazenly pulled out his sword to kill the demon kings. The 8 generals in the sky were also furious. Their eyes turned blood red, and the murderous aura that surged out of their bodies condensed into blood-red flames. Even though they had been corroded by the black qi and were already infected with the highly toxic plague, they were not afraid. However, they didn't feel the slightest bit of fear. They didn't even think about whether they would die. They all pulled out their swords and sabers and fearlessly rushed into the crowd below to kill the demon kings who released the highly toxic plague. Not only the 8 generals, but even the 40,000 Eastern Forest army around the crowd did not panic and flee. Even though the highly toxic plague had already spread and they were surrounded by the black qi, they were still calm and did their best to help the civilians escape. At this moment, the Eastern Forest Army's iron blood, pride, and dignity were undoubtedly displayed. Ji Tianqing's eyes were somewhat red, and his hands trembled in anger. The black qi floated in the air, and hundreds of thousands of civilians turned into blood and bones on the spot. It was a huge blow to him. Although he had seen the scene of a city full of bones before, it was not as tragic as this one. It was even more shocking. Under the highly toxic black qi that covered the sky, the civilians could not resist at all. They were poisoned to death like ants. Human lives were like grass, cheap and fragile. He had never hated the demons as much as he did now. He hated that he could not kill all the demons in the world. However, he did not rush into the crowd to kill the demon kings who released the highly toxic plague. Xiaofan and the 8 generals were enough to deal with them. He hurriedly released his spiritual energy and searched for traces of the blood god. After all, hundreds of thousands of civilians had been slaughtered on the spot, and a thick cloud of blood and qi filled the sky. Chapter 1240. Ji Tianqing originally thought that the blood god's son would be hiding in the crowd and devouring the blood qi. Or perhaps, the blood god's son would be hiding nearby and devouring the blood clouds in the sky. However, as he flew in the sky and searched the area with his divine soul, he couldn't find any trace of the blood god's son. He could only fly back to the sky above the crowd and use a secret martial arts technique to control the power of heaven and earth to create tornadoes. Swoosh! As he pushed out his palms, 2 terrifying tornadoes thousands of feet tall swept across the sky. Within a radius of 100 miles, an earth-shattering tornado immediately blew up. However, the howling tornadoes couldn't blow away the poisonous black gas that covered the sky. It was obviously unrealistic to use this method to disperse the poisonous plague. Ji Tianqing was filled with helplessness and anger. He extended his right palm and activated the power of the heaven-mending orb, releasing a white light vortex. The holy white light vortex was at least 10 feet wide and hung in the sky. The vortex released a terrifying devouring power that crazily devoured the poisonous black gas in the sky. This method was indeed effective. Endless poisonous black gas crazily rushed from all directions and was devoured by the white light vortex. After about 100 breaths, the poisonous black gas that covered 100 miles was completely devoured by the white light vortex. Heaven and earth returned to normal. Ji Tianqing removed the white light vortex and panted with a pale face. Using the technique like that just now consumed a lot of his magic power and made him very tired. Moreover, the heaven-mending orb in his mind had devoured too much poisonous black gas and had become dim. It was vaguely covered with a layer of black gas. Even with the power of the heaven-mending orb, it still needed a while to completely purify the poisonous black gas. On the vast grassland, everyone stopped running away and panted in shock. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky and looked down at the ground below. He saw an extremely tragic scene. The grassland within 100 miles had become a black-red wasteland. All the flowers and plants had turned into black ash. The ground was completely soaked in blood and turned black-red. It emitted a bloody smell that filled the sky. At least 700,000 skeletons and corpses were strewn all over the wasteland. Tens of thousands of corpses were scattered on the grass in all directions. Some belonged to the Donglin army, while others belonged to ordinary warriors and commoners. The previously crowded crowd had now become scattered and scattered. Ji Tianqing scanned with his divine sense and counted that there were only 90,000 survivors. Most of them were commoners, while the rest were soldiers of the East Forest Army. Of course, of the 90,000 survivors, half of them were infected with the poisonous plague. Their bodies were emitting black smoke. Their skin and flesh were constantly festering, and black blood was oozing out. They were twitching and screaming in pain. Even if they had a certain amount of strength and were not dead for the time being. However, within 2 or 3 days at most, these tens of thousands of people would turn into blood and bones. Even the 8 Sky Origin Stage generals looked gloomy. They seemed to be in low spirits. They had been corroded by the poisonous plague and were destined to only live for a month. However, they were not afraid. They did not cry or go crazy. They all knelt in front of Xiaofan and asked for forgiveness in fear and trepidation. Lord Divine General. This subordinate is incompetent and failed to protect the people. Please grant this subordinate death, Lord Divine General. Lord Divine General. We are the generals of the Donglin army, but we could not even protect our people. We are ashamed to see the people of the East Sea. We only ask for death. Xiaofan stood on the grass expressionlessly and looked at the 8 generals indifferently. The 3 demon kings who had disguised themselves as commoners and released the poisonous black smoke had been killed by him. However, hundreds of thousands of commoners had died. The disaster had happened, and the facts could not be reversed. There was a monstrous hatred in his heart that could not be washed away by the water of the East Sea. After a long silence, he opened his mouth and said in a low voice, "Generals, the demon race is powerful. They are despicable and cunning. They are not something we can stop. Even if I came here personally, I could not stop the disaster from happening. I could only watch as hundreds of thousands of commoners were slaughtered. You have done your best and did not disgrace the dignity of the Donglin army. What crime are you guilty of? Moreover, you have all been poisoned by the plague. You will not live for long. How can I blame you?" The 8 generals had mixed feelings. They all lowered their heads silently to show their respect to Xiaofan. At this moment, Ji Tianqing flew down from the sky and landed beside them. "Generals, do not despair. Even if you have been poisoned by the plague, you will not die for sure. Everyone, clean up the battlefield and settle down the surviving commoners. In 3 days, I will cast a spell to help you clear the poisonous black smoke." Ji Tianqing looked at the 8 generals and said calmly. Hearing his words, the 8 generals turned to look at him in unison. Their eyes were filled with disbelief and surprise. They could not believe that there was someone who could clear the plague poison. They all looked at Xiaofan with questioning eyes. Xiaofan nodded and said in a dignified tone, "This is the number 1 genius of the continent, the number 1 genius of the imperial residence. He is Ji Tianqing, lord of the Tianquan region." The eyes of the 8 generals immediately lit up, revealing a look of incomparable reverence. They all bowed to Ji Tianqing and said in unison, "Greetings, Lord Ji. Thank you for saving our lives. Generals, please rise." Ji Tianqing raised his hand and gestured for them to rise. Then, Xiaofan ordered the 8 generals to clean up the battlefield and reorganized the surviving commoners and the Donglin army. He followed Ji Tianqing and left the battlefield, rushing to the 3rd camp. When the two of them arrived at the refugee camp, they saw the situation in the camp. It was a scene of devastation and devastation. The 200-mile radius of the refugee camp was still shrouded in the black smoke. Most of the thousands of tents and wooden houses in the camp had collapsed. Some were even on fire. Inside the tents, wooden houses, and the grass, there was black and red blood everywhere. Bones were scattered everywhere. When the plague broke out, at least 200,000 commoners did not have time to escape from the refugee camp and died on the spot. Ji Tianqing and Xiaofan searched the entire refugee camp and only found a few hundred survivors. However, these people were all poisoned and did not have long to live. After the disaster of the poison outbreak, the 3rd camp was destroyed. Out of the millions of commoners, only a few tens of thousands were left. Xiaofan ordered the 8 generals to bring the survivors to the 3rd camp and take shelter there. He and Ji Tianqing stayed where they were, standing in the air above the wasteland that was covered in bones. Seeing the 700,000 commoners' corpses on the wasteland, Xiaofan used the earth element's secret art and dug a huge pit in the wasteland. Then, he buried the countless corpses in the deep pit, letting the corpses of the people rest in peace. Ji Tianqing frowned and pondered. He was thinking about a very important question. After Xiaofan was done, he came to his side and asked, "Tianqing, what are you thinking about? Did you find some clues?" Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a serious face, "So far, the 9 demon kings that were escorting the blood god Yin Qi were all killed by us. However, the blood god did not show up. We searched everywhere for it but could not find it. What does this mean?" Xiaofan was stunned and asked with a frown, "What does it mean? Could it be that it has been hiding in the dark and has not appeared?" "No." Ji Tianqing shook his head and said, "It is indeed hiding in the dark. However, it must be nearby and secretly watching us. I am sure that it must have some special method to detect our presence." Chapter 1241. Ji Tianqing's words enlightened Xiaofan. He nodded and said, "That's right. I had the same idea. Tianqing, what do you plan to do next?" Ji Tianqing looked coldly at the sky, staring at the dark red blood energy that covered the sky. He said in a low voice, "Nearly 1 million people were killed. I don't believe the blood god will let go of such a large amount of blood energy and souls." Xiaofan frowned slightly. He looked up at the dark red blood mist and asked, "Are you going to wait for the blood god to devour the blood energy and then find it?" Ji Tianqing nodded. Xiaofan quickly waved his hand and said, "Tianqing, we tried this method before. It didn't work at all." Ji Tianqing explained, "Previously, when we used the blood aura as a clue to search for the blood god's son, it would discover us in advance and hide. But today is different. I will disguise myself as a demon. You can't follow me. I have to act alone." "This." Xiaofan hesitated and asked worriedly, "Will this method work? If you face the blood god alone, I'm afraid you will be at a disadvantage." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said seriously, "The blood energy in souls have started to flow to the north. I have to act immediately. I don't have time to think too much." Then he landed on the wasteland from the sky. On the dark red wasteland, there were 3 broken corpses. They were the 3 demon kings that had been killed. His divine soul golden sword flew out from the top of his head and entered one of the demon king corpses. Under the control of his divine soul, the corpse moved as freely as a living person. In order to disguise himself more, he used a secret method to heal the injuries of the demon king's body. He also carried a few purpline demonic gourds and had the power of the 3 disasters and 9 tribulations. After doing all this, he put his main body into the sword world. Then, he transformed into a demon king and quickly flew into the sky, rushing towards the north. Xiaofan looked at his departing figure and sighed with a complicated expression. He murmured, "Tianqing, oh Tianqing, you have always been resourceful and resourceful. I hope this method will succeed. The blood god Sun is mysterious and powerful. You must be careful. Nothing can happen to him." After a long time, when Ji Tianqing's figure disappeared into the horizon, he withdrew his gaze. Ji Tianqing controlled the body of the demon king and flew in the sky in the form of a demon. His entire body was wrapped in a layer of black qi. No matter how one looked at it, he was an elite devil king powerhouse. Only an expert at the 6th level of the soul refinement realm or above would be able to see through the flaws and discover that his soul was not that of a demon. But he believed that blood god Yin Qi's strength hadn't reached the 6th level of the soul refinement realm yet. About 15 minutes later, he had flown over 1,000 miles away. In the gloomy sky, an invisible breeze blew, carrying the bloody mist that filled the sky as it flew towards the north. Ji Tianqing slowed down his flying speed and carefully observed the direction of the blood mist before continuing forward. Soon, another 15 minutes had passed. He flew over another 1,000 miles and arrived above a verdant forest. This lush forest had a circumference of over 10,000 miles, and it was filled with towering trees. Ji Tianqing keenly discovered that the bloody mist in the sky gathered above the forest and became extremely dense. Moreover, there was an area in the depths of the forest where the dark red blood mist condensed into a whirlpool. The whirlpool connected the sky to the forest and seemed to be connected to the ground. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed with a cold light. He thought to himself, "It should be here. The blood god Sun is indeed mysterious. I'm already so close, but I still can't sense its aura." He slowed down his flying speed and quietly flew into the forest towards the dark red whirlpool. At the beginning, the whirlpool didn't have any abnormalities and continued to devour the bloody mist. When Ji Tianqing got close, the whirlpool suddenly spun faster and condensed into a 100-meter-tall figure that rushed towards him. The figure was a giant. Its appearance was similar to that of the demon clan. It was extremely burly and exuded a monstrous bloody aura and a powerful aura. Its speed was as fast as lightning. In the blink of an eye, it rushed in front of Ji Tianqing and raised its fists to punch him. Two fist shadows as large as houses smashed towards Ji Tianqing with destructive power. Is this the blood god Sun? Ji Tianqing stood in the air with an indifferent expression. He stared at the bloody giant and released a strong murderous intent. When the two fist shadows came at him, he calmly moved 100 meters away and easily dodged the giant's attack. Bang bang! The giant's fists released a dark red light and smashed into the forest, causing two dull explosions. Within a radius of 100 miles, the ground was shaking intensely. 2,000-meter-wide craters were created on the ground, with mud and wood chips splashing all over the sky. The bloody giant missed its attack, so it nimbly turned around and jumped at Ji Tianqing. It waved its hands and released two beams of red light. Swish swish. 200-meter-long dark red pillars of light shot toward Ji Tianqing with an aura that seemed capable of penetrating everything. Ji Tianqing calmly used the sword soul battle technique. His body flashed and passed between the two light pillars. He dodged the attack of the light pillars and rushed to the front of the blood-red giant. You are only at the 9th level of the sky origin stage. If you are the blood god Sun, that would be disappointing. Ji Tianqing stared coldly at the blood-colored giant. As he shouted coldly, he waved the broken sword in his hand and slashed out a shocking sword light. Draw your sword. 100-meter-long golden sword light slashed out diagonally from bottom to top, instantly hitting the blood-colored giant. Bang! With a deafening sound, the bloody giant was cut in half by the holy sword light and exploded. It collapsed into a bloody mist that filled the sky and spread out in all directions. Ji Tianqing checked it with his spiritual power. He found that the bloody mist was just the essence of blood. It didn't contain any of the 3 disasters and 9 tribulations power. He immediately concluded that the bloody giant was not the blood god's son. The real blood god's son was probably hiding underground. He immediately flew forward and used his divine soul power to investigate the situation underground. However, the blood mist that filled the sky gathered together and condensed into a ferocious and terrifying blood-colored giant demon. Roar! The 100-meter-tall giant demon was like a mutated demonic ape. It roared crazily and jumped at Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing didn't look at it. He calmly took out his real body and put the golden sword into it. He turned back to his original appearance and threw the demon's body on the ground. At this moment, the giant demon had just gotten behind him. He swung his sword backward. Bang! With another muffled sound, the giant demon was cut in half by the golden sword light and turned into a bloody mist. Ji Tianqing strode over 10 miles and finally arrived at the blood god's son's hiding place. Chapter 1242. Whoosh! 9 blood-red pillars of light shot out from the depths of the ground and into the sky, illuminating half of the sky in a dark red color. 18 demonic dragons made of black smoke pierced through the ground and the forest. They flew up to the sky and formed a mysterious formation. The earth-shattering roar was like the roar of a primeval beast, but also like the roar of a primordial demon that had just woken up. At that moment, the sky changed color. The sun and the moon dimmed. Within 1,000 miles, the sky and the earth were covered by the blood-red light and the black smoke. It was like a ghost town. The air was filled with the smell of blood. The wind was blowing over the forest. The poisonous black smoke was spreading out. In the dense forest, whether it was the weak flowers or the towering trees that were 100 meters tall, they were all corroded by the black gas and turned into black ash on the spot. Without a doubt, that was the power of the poisonous plague. The man who made such a big noise was the blood god who was hiding in the ground. Ji Tianqing could feel that the 18 black dragons and the 9 blood-red light columns were all as powerful as the soul-refining stage cultivators. He deeply understood that such a shocking change in heaven and earth was caused by his breakthrough to the soul refinement realm. When he thought of this, his expression changed on the spot. His eyes surged with murderous intent, and his chest surged with intense hatred. Damn it! In the end, I was still a step too late. The blood god's son has broken through to the soul refining realm. He knew that when the blood god was born, he was only at the first or second level of the sky origin stage. Within 2 months, the blood god Yin Qi had killed millions of people with the poisonous plague. He had absorbed a huge amount of blood and souls. He had been growing stronger and stronger. Now, he had reached the soul refining stage. Once the blood god's son reached the soul refining realm, his strength would increase exponentially, and the power of his poison would be unstoppable. Even soul refinement realm experts would be corroded by the toxic plague and might even lose their lives. That was horrible. Blood god Yin Qi. Since I have found you, I will not let you leave alive. Ji Tianqing gnashed his teeth and growled. Ignoring the sky-piercing blood-red light and the threat of the 18 poisonous demonic dragons, he released his divine soul and sent it deep into the ground. He immediately saw a black and red glowing mist 3,000 meters below the ground, which was surging violently. The ball of black and red light was like a ball of light. It contained a terrifying power that caused one's heart to palpitate. It constantly changed shape and flashed with a dark red light. Without a doubt, that ball of black and red light was the real blood god's son, Yin Qi. It had reached the 9th level of heaven origin long ago and was about to break through to the soul refinement realm. That was why the 3 demon kings created this disaster and slaughtered almost 1 million civilians. Now that it had devoured enough blood, qi, and souls, it had finally reached the soul-refining realm. It no longer feared anything and could wreak havoc in the human territory. It no longer needed to hide. Just as Ji Tianqing was about to rush into the ground, it had already rushed out of the ground and flew into the sky. It floated high in the sky, flashing with a dark red light. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a human, like a demon expert covered in blood-red light. Its body was tall and sturdy, and its face was ugly and ferocious. It even bared 2 sharp fangs. Even its long hair was condensed from endless blood-red light. It looked very evil. Even though Ji Tianqing knew that it was condensed from blood-red light and poisonous plagues, its body was solid and very real. If he had not seen its body change with his own eyes, Ji Tianqing would not have been able to tell if it was a demon in a short time. Yin Qi stood in the dark red sky filled with blood-red light, looking down at Ji Tianqing from above. There were 18 black demonic dragons circling around it, making it look extremely powerful and noble. It stared at Ji Tianqing and sized him up. It opened its wide mouth and sneered, "Little worm of the human race, I didn't expect you to have some intelligence. After only a few interactions with me, you could figure out my intentions. You even pretended to be a demon king to get close to me. If not for the fact that I was at the critical juncture of breaking through and had no time to take care of you, I would not have let you find me." Its voice was low and gloomy, making those who heard it feel extremely uncomfortable in their hearts. What made Ji Tianqing even more surprised was that it spoke in the human language. However, he was too lazy to waste time with Yin Qi. He murderously shouted, "Yin Qi, so what if you've broken through to the soul-refining realm? Don't you dare think about slaughtering my people. I will kill you today." As his voice fell, he brazenly drew his sword and slashed at Yin Qi. "Draw your sword." Whoosh! 100-meter-long golden sword light, carrying a holy and noble aura, slashed at Yin Qi from below at an extremely fast speed. Yin Qi's expression immediately changed, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He waved his hands and controlled 2 demonic dragons to charge at the sword light without fear of death. The other 16 ferocious demonic dragons descended from the sky and rushed towards Ji Tianqing. They extended their claws and fangs and covered his body. Bang bang! With 2 muffled sounds, the 2 demonic dragons were shattered by the sword light. They turned into poisonous black gas and spread in all directions. The power of the golden sword light did not decrease at all. It hit Yin Qi again and cut him in half. However, the 2 halves of his body shone with red light. In the blink of an eye, they flew together and reformed into a complete body. At the same time, the 16 ferocious and terrifying demonic dragons also struck Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing had already spread out his golden wings to protect himself. The 16 demonic dragons hit the golden wings one after another. A series of muffled sounds echoed between heaven and earth. The earth trembled violently from the impact. A deep pit with a radius of 100 miles appeared on the ground. Ji Tianqing was smashed into the bottom of the pit. His golden wings were buried by endless mud. The 16 demonic dragons all collapsed and turned into poisonous black gas that blotted out the sky and covered the sky for hundreds of miles. Ji Tianqing flew out of the deep pit unscathed. With the protection of the Kenshin bloodline and the heaven-mending pearl, he was not afraid of the black gas at all. He rushed to Yin Qi in the sky again and stabbed with the broken sword. Piercing sword. Whoosh! A cold light bloomed and disappeared in an instant. Before Yin Qi could react, he was hit by the cold light that was condensed to the extreme. Bang! Following a deafening explosion, the cold light exploded, turning into a dazzling white light that covered the heavens and earth. At that moment, the black gas in the sky was dispelled. The dark red blood light also became dim. Between heaven and earth, there was only the dazzling cold light that was infinitely bright. Yin Qi's body was blown to pieces on the spot. It turned into a black and red mist and scattered in the sky. However, it was not a body of flesh and blood. It was an extremely special blood god's son with a special constitution. It was only slightly injured. It immediately gathered together and reformed into a human form. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Tianqing had already arrived in front of it and let out a low shout filled with killing intent. Chapter 1243. The moment Yin Qi reformed his body, Ji Tianqing opened the third eye on his forehead. Thunder Spiritual Eye. When he was fighting Yin Qi, the 18 demonic dragons made a mess and obstructed his attack. Therefore, he resisted using the Thunder Spiritual Eye. After all, he only had one chance. If he missed it, it would be too difficult to kill Yin Qi again. But now, the 18 demonic dragons had been defeated, and he was in front of Yin Qi. Yin Qi had just reformed his body and was unprepared. This was definitely the best opportunity. He opened his golden Dharma eye, and the blue spiritual eye instantly released endless power of lightning. The azure blue lightning energy gathered into a lightning pillar as thick as a water bucket, and fiercely shot towards Yin Qi. Kaboom! An earth-shattering explosion resounded through the clouds and shook heaven and earth. At that moment, the destructive lightning struck Yin Qi, causing the sky to be illuminated by the dazzling lightning. The power of lightning was the most yang power in heaven and earth. In the hearts of all living beings, lightning represented heaven and earth. It was a power that only the gods could control. Yin Qi was the blood god son of the evil demon. He was an evil being and was most afraid of yang power. He had never thought that Ji Tianqing would be able to control the power of lightning that was most effective against him. When the pillar of lightning engulfed him, he revealed an extremely terrified expression and let out a miserable cry. No! But his miserable cry was immediately drowned out by the earth-shattering explosion. His body was also smashed into pieces by the pillar of lightning and disintegrated into countless black and red mist. The wisps of black and red mist were the power of the poison plague and the blood demon Dao. Within the lightning pillar, they quickly disappeared like snow melting away. The lightning that covered the sky lasted for 10 breaths of time in the sky before gradually dissipating. The blood god's son, Yin Qi, had been completely killed by the pillar of lightning. Only some scattered blood and black mist were still scattered in the sky. After a while, the loud noise that reverberated between heaven and earth disappeared. Heaven and earth returned to normal. Everything returned to normal. Ji Tianqing stood alone high in the sky and looked at the empty sky. He heaved a sigh of relief. The books in the heavenly tome pavilion didn't lie to me. Lightning really is the bane of the blood god. Thankfully, this blood god scion had only just broken through to the spirit refinement realm when I killed it with my lightning Dharma eye. If it was allowed to wreak havoc in the eastern sea and slaughter tens of millions of people, who knew how powerful it would become? At that time, I'm afraid that even if Xiaofan and I join forces, we won't be able to do anything to it. Thinking of this, he was still a little worried. He hurriedly cast a spell to gather the bloody light and black gas in the sky, and used the heaven-mending orb to devour them. Only after doing all this did he truly feel at ease. The blood god and the 9 demon kings were completely dead. The plague power and bloody light left behind by the blood god were all removed. The disaster and crisis of the East Sea had finally been resolved. Ji Tianqing relaxed and was about to turn around and fly away. At this moment, a green light streaked across the sky and arrived in front of Ji Tianqing in just a few breaths. The person who had come was Xiaofan. His expression was somewhat solemn, and his brows were filled with worry. When he saw Ji Tianqing and saw that Ji Tianqing was safe and sound, he let out a sigh of relief. He hurriedly flew in front of Ji Tianqing and asked anxiously, "Tianqing, I just saw that the sky here was blood red, and there was a phenomenon of heaven and earth. Did something happen?" Did you find the blood god Xian? Did you fight with it? Where is it now? Xiaofan's mood was both worried and anxious. He asked several questions in one breath. Ji Tianqing revealed a trace of a smile and waved his hand at him. He persuaded, Lord Xiao, don't worry. Let's go back first. We'll talk as we go. Then, he flew back with Xiaofan. As they hurried back, he recounted what had happened. When Xiaofan heard that the blood god Xian had broken through to the spirit refinement realm and caused a phenomenon of heaven and earth, he was very worried. When he heard that Ji Tianqing had used the power of thunder to kill the blood god Xian, he was relieved and was full of excitement. I didn't expect the blood god Xian to grow so quickly. It reached the spirit refinement realm in just 2 months. Fortunately, Tianqing, you helped me. With your wisdom and strength, you successfully killed the blood god Xian. If it weren't for your help, I really wouldn't know what to do. The consequences would be unimaginable. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said with a heavy expression, the blood god Xian is a special kind of demon. It can't be judged by common sense. As long as it massacres creatures and obtains enough blood, its strength will skyrocket. It will be 100 times stronger than any genius martial artist. The reason why the blood god Xian's strength increased so quickly was because of the lives of millions of people. Xiaofan said with hatred, Tianqing, now that you've killed the blood god Xian Yin Qi, it can be considered as revenge for the people who died. It's a pity that millions of people have died. Even if you kill the blood god Xian 1,000 times, you won't be able to save their lives. Ji Tianqing patted him on the shoulder and comforted him. The blood god Xian plan was a conspiracy of the ancient demon emperor. The purpose was to bring chaos to the 3 major races and the entire Tianxian continent. Not only the people of the East Sea suffered, but the people and martial artists of all races on the continent also suffered. The dead are gone, but the living still need to be taken care of. Lord Xiao, you still have to cheer up and settle the millions of homeless people and rebuild the coastal cities. Your mission is still very important. Xiaofan nodded and said solemnly, Tianqing, I know all of this. Don't worry, I'll make proper arrangements for the follow-up. After this disaster, the cities of the East Sea will need at least 10 years to recover. Fortunately, with your help, we were able to kill the blood god Xian in such a short time. You saved the millions of people of the East Sea. You are the second parent of the people and the hero of the East Sea. Let's return to the Black Rock City now. I want to announce this matter and let the people of the East Sea remember your kindness forever. Ji Tianqing shook his head and said with a smile, Lord Xiao, protecting the people of my race is the duty and obligation of us martial artists. As for the titles of second parent and hero, there's no need for them. Xiaofan also revealed a smile and said, Tianqing, I know you don't care about these titles. You saved the people, not only because of morality, but also because of friendship. It's definitely not for the sake of reputation. But you have made such a great contribution and saved the millions of people of the East Sea's 100 cities. This is an indelible fact. I'm just announcing the news as it is and will not flatter you. After the people know the news, how they feel about you, that's their business. Why should you care? Chapter 1244. 2 days later, in the Black Rock City. Although the great defensive array of the Black Rock City was still activated, it was still shining with colorful lights. But the poisonous black gas inside and outside the city had faded a lot. It was almost impossible to see it clearly with the naked eye. In at most 3 to 5 days, the poisonous black gas that filled the world would gradually dissipate. The atmosphere in the city, from the previous dull and dead silence, became lively and relaxed. The reason was that the Divine General's estate had announced a great piece of news yesterday. The number 1 genius of the continent, the number 1 genius of the imperial residence, Tianshan region Lord Ji Tianqing, had found the source of the poisonous plague 2 days ago and killed it with a thunderous method. Such a simple piece of news, when it was spread in the Black Rock City, it instantly caused the people of the city to boil. Since the outbreak of the poisonous plague, in the past 2 months, all the people were in a heavy mood, gloomy and hopeless. Everyone was holed up in the city, hiding in dark cellars or secret rooms, waiting for the day when the poisonous plague would penetrate the great defensive array and invade the city. The taste of waiting in despair for death made everyone feel that there was nothing left to live for. They were both angry and helpless. Today, Ji Tianqing had found the source of the poisonous plague and killed it. The haze that shrouded everyone's hearts finally disappeared. The crisis of the East Sea cities was resolved. The people no longer had to worry about the poisonous plague. After experiencing despair and surviving the crisis of death, the people welcomed a pleasant surprise and celebration. Nearly 1 million people in the city were discussing this matter enthusiastically. The streets and alleys were singing the praises of Ji Tianqing's name and deeds. Everyone was full of admiration, worship and gratitude for him. They regarded him as the savior of the Black Rock City, the second parent of the people of the city. The news announced by the Divine General's estate not only spread in the Black Rock City, it also spread to the coastal cities. Even the 3 refugee camps on the Tianchuan Plain received the news. The hundreds of millions of people in the hundreds of cities, like the people of the Black Rock City, were overjoyed and excited to the extreme. The cities were immersed in the celebration, bustling with noise and excitement. Hundreds of millions of people were singing praises of Ji Tianqing, shedding tears of gratitude and prostrating themselves in worship. In just a few days, the news and Ji Tianqing's reputation had spread throughout the eastern coast. This time, he had also become a well-known hero in the Eastern Sea, receiving the gratitude and worship of billions of people. Ji Tianqing spent 2 days recuperating in the Divine General's estate in Black Rock City. Xiaofan, Xiaochen, Xiaoling and the others were busy dealing with government affairs, restoring order to the coastal cities and comforting the people who were affected by the disaster. The post-disaster reconstruction work was also being carried out in an orderly manner. Ji Tianqing estimated that it would take Xiaofan at least 2 years to settle down the citizens of the various cities in the East Sea. Early in the morning of the 3rd day, he was meditating in his room when Yunyao's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. "Tianqing, my injuries have healed." Ji Tianqing suddenly showed a trace of joy, and quickly opened the exit of the sword world. Swoosh! With a flash of silver light, Yunyao flew out of the sword world and landed in front of Ji Tianqing. She looked at Ji Tianqing and saw that he was safe and sound. Then she looked around and asked, "Tianqing, where are we?" Ji Tianqing explained, "This is the Divine General's estate in Black Rock City. When I came here before, 9 demon kings escorted the blood god here and spread the poisonous plague everywhere." He explained what had happened a few days ago to Yunyao. After Yunyao heard it, she knew that such a drastic change had happened in the various cities in the East Sea while she was in seclusion to heal her injuries. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing used his wisdom to find the blood god in the shortest time possible and killed him. Otherwise, the various cities in the East Sea would have suffered an even greater disaster, and the people would have been plunged into misery and suffering. The two of them talked for a long time and only ended at noon. Yunyao thought for a while and said to Ji Tianqing, "Tianqing, now that the blood god has been eliminated by you, the crisis of the various cities in the East Sea has been resolved. Divine General Donglin has to preside over the reconstruction work after the disaster and busy himself with various official matters. We can't help him by staying at the Divine General's estate and will only delay his time. Why don't we take our leave now and head to the East Sea's returning ruins as soon as possible to do our own things?" Ji Tianqing nodded and smiled. "That's right, I have the same idea. We will go and bid farewell to Lord Xiao later." After the two of them agreed, they left the room together and went to the main hall of the Divine General's estate to bid farewell to Xiaohan. In the main hall, Xiaohan was sitting on the main seat and handling official matters. Xiao Ling stood beside him and was busy helping him deal with official documents and memorials. More than 20 Donglin army generals and city lords stood on both sides of the main hall and took turns to report the news and situation. When Ji Tianqing and Yunyao arrived, Xiaofan hurriedly stood up to welcome them. The generals and city lords in the hall also bowed and saluted to Ji Tianqing, expressing their utmost respect. Xiao Ling's gaze landed on Yunyao and sized her up with a complicated expression. When Xiaofan introduced Ji Tianqing and Yunyao to everyone, her body trembled and her eyes dimmed. Yunyao's peerless beauty and goddess-like temperament made her feel ashamed of her inferiority. At this moment, she saw Yunyao with her own eyes. Only then did she know that Ji Tianqing's beloved wife was actually so beautiful and peerless. She also finally understood why Ji Tianqing had always been indifferent to her confession and intimacy. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but lower her head. Her eyes were slightly red as she thought to herself, probably only a peerless beauty like Yunyao is worthy of the perfect big brother Tianqing, right? At this moment, Ji Tianqing explained the purpose of his visit to Xiaofan and bowed to him to bid him farewell. Naturally, Xiaofan warmly urged him to stay, hoping that he and Yunyao could stay in Black Rock City for a few more days. Tianqing, I should have treated you well and let you rest here for a few days when you came to Black Rock City this time. I didn't expect that you would encounter the poisonous plague. Not only did I not let you rest, I even troubled you to take the risk with me. Tianqing, please stay for a few more days and let me make up for it. Also, let the Donglin army and the people of the various cities have a chance to express their gratitude in person. Xiaofan sincerely urged them to stay, and the Donglin army's generals and city lords in the main hall also chimed in. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao tactfully rejected everyone's kind intentions, saying that they still had something important to do and had to complete it as soon as possible. Both sides bid farewell. Xiaofan led the generals and city lords and personally sent Ji Tianqing and Yunyao off from the Divine General's estate. Everyone stood at the gate of the Divine General's estate and watched Ji Tianqing and Yunyao fly into the sky. Their figures gradually disappeared before they turned around and returned to the estate. Chapter 1245. After Ji Tianqing and Yunyao left the Black Rock City, they rushed to the eastern sea's returning ruins with lightning speed. Although the sky above the coastal area was still filled with some scattered poisonous black air, it would not pose a threat to them. After 4 hours, the two of them were far away from the Black Rock City and were flying above the vast sea. After a long silence, Yunyao could not help but ask, Tianqing, that girl standing next to Divine General Donglin. Is she his daughter? When Yunyao asked this question, she tried her best to maintain a calm tone and expression. On the surface, it seemed that she only asked casually and did not have any other intentions. However, Ji Tianqing was connected to her mind and could immediately feel that she cared about this matter. She only asked after thinking for a long time. A woman's intuition is terrifyingly accurate. Today, Yao Yao saw Xiao Ling for the first time, and she could sense the abnormality. As this thought flashed across his mind, he also answered with a calm expression, No, that girl is called Xiao Ling, she is a disciple of the Xiao clan. According to seniority, she is Xiao Han's niece. Oh. Yunyao nodded and did not ask any more questions. She and Ji Tianqing were connected in their minds. They were each other's true love. There were many things and words that the two of them could understand without speaking. This was telepathy. Although she could see that Xiao Ling had deep feelings for Ji Tianqing and had fallen in love with him. However, she knew Ji Tianqing's personality and trusted him unconditionally. This matter was only mentioned briefly and there was no need to say anything more. The Eastern Sea's returning ruins was located in the northeast direction of the endless Eastern Sea and was close to the northern desert. It would take more than a month to travel from the Black Rock City to the Eastern Sea's returning ruins. After traveling for half a month, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao entered the deep part of the Eastern Sea. Under the vast sea surface, not only were there endless fishes, there were also hundreds of millions of people of the Water Clan. That evening, the setting sun shone on the vast sea, emitting a dense golden light. Ji Tianqing was flying rapidly above the sea when he suddenly sensed that there was a huge change in the world inside the broken sword. His soul entered the world within the sword, and he immediately saw a mountain range thousands of kilometers away from peaceful Soil City. Thunder rumbled, lightning flashed, and golden light soared into the sky. The sky within 1,000 miles was covered by dark clouds. Purple and blue lightning arcs were crazily shuttling and exploding in the clouds. Muffled rumbling noises echoed in the sky one after another. A fierce wind blew between the heavens and the earth, stirring up dust and gravel that filled the air, forming several tornadoes that were thousands of feet high, wreaking havoc in the mountains. At the foot of one of the mountain peaks, divine golden light surged wildly from the ground and shot up into the sky, illuminating half of the sky with golden light. Such an earth-shattering scene was clearly visible to the entire sword world. In peaceful Soil City thousands of kilometers away from the mountain range, the several thousand people of the Earth Spirit clan were also alarmed by this great change in the world. Countless Earth Spirit clansmen stared fearfully at the sky and in the direction of the mountain range in confusion. All of peaceful Soil City was in an uproar. The people were filled with worry as they whispered to each other, wondering if some great calamity was about to occur. However, when Ji Tianqing saw the scene in the mountains, he immediately smiled in relief. His heart was filled with excitement and anticipation. This was because he knew that this was not the wrath of the world, nor was it the omen of some calamity. This was clearly a natural phenomenon caused by someone breaking through to the soul refinement realm. He clearly remembered that after the little black dragon and Xianyu devoured the sacred phoenix heart, they had been cultivating in seclusion near peaceful Soil City. Calculating the time, 2 or 3 months had passed. The little black dragon and Xianyu should have succeeded in refining the sacred phoenix heart. As a result, Ji Tianqing flew into the sword world and arrived above the mountains. He did not fear the wind and lightning. His eyes were filled with anticipation as he stared at the mountain radiating with golden light. After a long while, the heaven-shaking winds and lightning gradually subsided. The black clouds in the sky also slowly dissipated. At the foot of the mountain, a heaven-shaking dragon's roar suddenly rang out. Roar! As the dragon's roar rang out, a black dragon that was over 10,000 feet long emerged from the bottom of the mountain. Its body was majestic and mighty to the extreme. It twisted its massive body and flew into the sky like a streak of black light, dancing in the air. When Ji Tianqing saw its appearance, he immediately smiled in relief. He muttered, "This little black dragon has finally refined the sacred phoenix heart and successfully broken through to the soul refinement realm." However, after breaking through to the soul refinement realm, not only has its body grown 10 times larger, even its outer appearance has changed. He could clearly see that the black dragon had not only grown to 10,000 feet long, but its outer appearance had also undergone subtle changes. The dragon horns on its forehead had become even more protruding and curved like antlers. Its eyes had become even more profound, imbued with a powerful sense of majesty. Most importantly, it originally only had 4 legs, but now it had a 5th leg. Not only had its strength increased by several times, its aura had become even more sacred and majestic. How could this be? How could the little black dragon's appearance change? It seems to have evolved to become even more noble. Could this be a change brought about by the sacred phoenix heart? Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows in confusion as he carefully observed the black dragon. At this time, the black dragon calmed down and hurriedly suppressed the excitement in its heart. It swooped down from the sky and flew to Ji Tianqing's side. It looked at Ji Tianqing with bright eyes and said in a pleasantly surprised voice, "Old Ji, I have successfully refined the sacred phoenix heart and broken through to the soul refinement realm. Old Ji, thank you so much." If not for the sacred phoenix heart you gave me, I would never have broken through to the soul refinement realm so quickly. Moreover, I feel that after breaking through to the soul refinement realm, a mysterious door has opened, leading to an even more sacred and powerful world. After crossing this door, my talent and potential have completely exploded, allowing me to have limitless possibilities. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment. Then, he revealed a gratified smile and nodded. The divine origin realm and the soul refinement realm are the differences between the ordinary and the extraordinary. You have reached the soul refinement realm and have indeed stepped into a new realm, entering into a more profound world of martial arts. With the help of the sacred phoenix heart, your talent and aptitude will of course increase greatly. When you reach the soul refinement realm, it will all explode. I believe that your path of cultivation will be smooth from now on and the speed at which you increase your strength will be much faster. As he spoke, he released his spiritual strength and searched for traces of Qianyu. Little black dragon, you have already refined the sacred phoenix heart and broken through to the soul refinement realm. Logically speaking, Qianyu should have finished refining it, right? The black dragon gently shook its head and said with a complicated tone, Qianyu has not finished refining it and is still in closed-door cultivation. I don't know when she will break through to the soul refinement realm. Chapter 1246. Qianyu was still in seclusion to refine the dragon phoenix sacred heart, so Ji Tianqing did not disturb her. He left the sword world with the black dragon and returned to the sky above the East Sea. When the black dragon appeared in the sky, its huge body brought about a huge gust of wind, casting a huge shadow on the surface of the sea. It let out a joyful dragon roar and circled in the sky before flying in front of Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. Yunyao also revealed an expression of disbelief when she saw such a huge change in the black dragon. She was happy and gratified for it. After chatting for a while, the black dragon carried Ji Tianqing and Yunyao to the returning ruins of the East Sea. Now that the black dragon had reached the first tier of the soul refinement realm, its flying speed was unbelievably fast. It could travel 120,000 miles in a day. Although this was not as fast as Ji Tianqing's sword kinesis flight, it was still very powerful. However, its magic power was incomparably abundant, and its strength lasted for a long time. Even flying continuously for a month wouldn't be a problem. 5 days later, the black dragon carried Ji Tianqing and Yunyao and flew in the Northeast Sea. Below them was a boundless blue sea. There were a few scattered islands every few tens of thousands of miles. Yunyao sat upright on the back of the black dragon, meditating the entire time. Ji Tianqing stood on the dragon's back and looked at the sea in front of him. His expression became more and more serious. His brows were tightly knitted as if he was thinking about something. Suddenly, the black dragon turned to look at him and said in a low voice, "Old Ji, I feel that something is wrong with this sea." Ji Tianqing's thoughts were interrupted. He looked at it with a surprised expression and asked, "You also see the problem?" "Yes." The black dragon gradually slowed down and said in a low voice, "I feel that the color of the sea water in this sea seems to be darker. It's also emitting poison. I also noticed that there are many corpses of fish, prawns, and aquatic demons floating on the sea." Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a serious expression, "That's right. The sea water in this sea is indeed very poisonous. Those fish, prawns, and aquatic demons were all poisoned to death. If I'm not wrong, something must have happened to this part of the sea. There must be more corpses buried at the bottom of the sea." Black Dragon was silent for a moment, and then worriedly asked, "Old Ji, could it be that the Aqua clan is in trouble? Should we go take a look? After all, you and Tai are sworn brothers, and I am also a member of the Black Dragon race." Ji Tianqing only thought about it for a moment before he nodded in agreement. "Alright, let's go to the bottom of the sea and see what's going on. I have a bad premonition. I hope it won't come true." Yunyao had been awakened by their conversation. She opened her eyes and looked at Ji Tianqing, asking, "Tianqing, do you have a bad feeling? Do you mean that the changes in this sea area have something to do with the blood god and the demons?" Ji Tianqing slightly nodded, then continued in a deep voice, "By now, the demon clan has sent out a great number of blood gods, crazily slaughtering the people of the three kinds, including the water kind. If a blood god sneaks into the East Sea and slaughters the people in the territory of the water kind, it will be troublesome." Yunyao understood his concern and quickly nodded. "In that case, let's not rush to the ruins of the East Sea. Let's go to the bottom of the sea and see what's going on first." As soon as she finished speaking, Black Dragon descended from the sky and dived into the vast East Sea with a swoosh. It was a dragon of the sea, so it could travel through the vast sea effortlessly. Instead, it was like a fish in water. Moreover, Black Dragon, Ji Tianqing, and Yunyao were all in the soul-refining realm. They were not afraid of the poison in the sea at all. In just a few short breaths, Black Dragon had dived to a depth of 5 kilometers. The light in the deep sea was dim, the water was cold, and the pressure was extremely high. It was dead silent in all directions. No sound could be heard, and not a single fish could be seen. Under Ji Tianqing's command, Black Dragon continued to dive into the sea. When it reached a depth of 15 kilometers, it finally reached the bottom of the sea that was full of reefs and corals. The cold bottom of the sea contained rich mineral resources. There were many rocks and reefs that contained metal components. There were also glowing aquatic plants that would emit a faint light. However, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao looked around and found that the aquatic plants and corals at the bottom of the sea had all withered and died. There were also large piles of fish corpses in the reefs and mud. Most of them were rotten and only bones were left. The seawater contained strong poison. There was also black blood and rotten flesh that could be seen with the naked eye swimming slowly with the current. Black Dragon quickly traveled through the dark bottom of the sea and flew towards the northeast. During this process, everyone could only see that the bottom of the sea was covered in white bones. They were all the corpses of various fish and aquatic creatures. From giant whales that were thousands of meters long to palm-sized fish, prawns, and shells, none of them were spared. Even the aquatic demons and aquatic creatures that had a certain level of strength could not escape the corrosion of the poison. After they died, they turned into rotten bones and lay on the dark and cold bottom of the sea. 2 hours later, Black Dragon had traveled more than 10,000 kilometers under the sea. An underwater city appeared in front of everyone. This was an ancient city with a circumference of tens of miles. It was situated on a flat reef, built from countless huge pitch-black reefs. The walls of the ancient city and the buildings in the city were covered in aquatic plants and aquatic plants. They looked very strange and rare. If it was a normal day, the hundreds of thousands of aquatic creatures living in the city would be herding billions of fish and prawns and raising countless powerful aquatic creatures. The dense schools of fish and all kinds of glowing fish and aquatic creatures would also bring a faint light to the ancient city. Colorful corals would also grow in the ancient city, bringing beautiful colors to the dark ancient city. Such an underwater ancient city was beautiful and magnificent. It was exhilarating and exciting. However, when Ji Tianqing and Yunyao arrived at the top of the ancient city, they could not see such a beautiful scene. What they saw was a cold and dark ancient city. There was not a trace of light or colorful colors. There were only hundreds of millions of dead fish and prawns, and hundreds of thousands of dead aquatic creatures and aquatic creatures piled up in the city, exuding a chilling aura of death. Seeing such a tragic scene, Yunyao and Black Dragon both had heavy hearts. Ji Tianqing flew into the ancient city and opened his pure heart Dharma eye. He released his divine soul power and carefully checked the situation in the city. After a while, he figured out the reason and said to Yunyao, "Yao Yao, I was right. This underwater ancient city and this sea area were destroyed by the poison." Yunniao asked with a serious face. Tianqing, are you sure this has something to do with the blood god and the demon race? Tianqing nodded and said coldly, I've been in contact with the poisonous plague in the coastal cities and killed the blood god's son with my own hands. I'm not unfamiliar with the power of calamity. I'm sure this is the work of the blood god and the demon race. Chapter 1247. Yunniao had always believed Tianqing's words without a doubt. However, she frowned in confusion and asked, Tianqing, the son of the blood god, Yin Qi, spread a poisonous plague in the coastal cities. It was a powerful black gas. In this endless eastern sea, I am afraid the black mist would not spread far. I am afraid the poison in the sea water is not the poisonous black qi, right? Tianqing nodded and said, That's right, Yao Yao, you have observed carefully. The poison in this sea is not a poisonous plague, but a form of black water. The black water is extremely poisonous and one drop can kill an elite warrior at the Sky Prime stage. Even if the poisonous black water is mixed in the sea and its toxicity is weakened many times, it can still easily kill living creatures below the Sky Prime stage. I estimate that even the elite warriors and water demons at the Sky Prime stage would not last long after being corroded by the poisonous black water. Yunniao nodded slightly and said thoughtfully, This way, the blood god that spread the poison in this sea is different from Yin Qi. He also carries a different calamity power. Tianqing agreed and said with a cold tone, Although the blood god has different calamity power, they are all born from the 3 calamities and 9 tribulations. Each blood god is escorted by elite warriors of the demon clan. Those elite warriors of the demon clan can also use the purple Yin demonic gourd to spread the calamity power. Besides, these blood god were only at the Sky Prime stage when they were born. After they killed a large number of living creatures, they absorbed a huge amount of blood and souls to break into the refined soul stage. I don't know how long the disaster has happened in this sea area, and how powerful is the blood god's son now. Yunniao thought for a moment and said with a solemn expression, Tianqing, we are not familiar with the situation in this sea area. We don't know what happened and it's difficult to solve this problem. I think we should first find the ruler of this sea area and then think of a solution. Okay. Tianqing nodded without hesitation and let the black dragon speed up. In the next few hours, the black dragon traveled at a rapid speed under the sea. The bottom of the ocean for 100,000 miles in radius was almost covered in dead bodies of all kinds of fish and aquatic creatures. Even the few cities that they passed by were piled up with mountains of corpses, becoming uninhabited dead cities. Around 20 hours later, the black dragon flew for 100,000 miles and finally met a few living water-kind powerful beings. They were 4 Sky Origin stage water-kind warriors, and they looked like human beings. However, their bodies had obvious aquatic characteristics, such as fish scales and fish tails, and so on. They flashed across the bottom of the ocean, heading north as fast as they could. The black dragon stopped them and told them the name of Tianqing, as well as the purpose of their visit. Although the 4 Aqua tribe experts had never heard of Tianqing's name, they were very respectful to Tianqing and Prince Tai after learning that Tianqing was a friend of Prince Tai. After some negotiation, Tianqing found out that the 4 water tribe experts were the commanders of the searching dragon guards in the Black Ink Sea area. The area within a radius of 500,000 miles was the territory of the Black Ink Sea area, which was under the jurisdiction of the Black Ink Dragon King and belonged to the imperial court of the water tribe. There were 150,000 searching dragon guards under the Black Ink Dragon King, who were responsible for patrolling and protecting this area. Since half a month ago, a strong poison of unknown origin appeared in the Black Ink Sea area, which killed hundreds of millions of aquatic creatures in just a few days, causing a huge disaster. In the past half a month, the mysterious strong poison had spread crazily, almost affecting the entire Black Ink Sea area. At least 30 million aquatic creatures were corroded by the strong poison, and had died and turned into skeletons. The remaining 300 million aquatic creatures were also escorted and led by the searching dragon guards, and they left the Black Ink Sea area in batches. The 4 commanders of the searching dragon guards were all candidates to bring up the rear, and they were responsible for searching for the remaining and lost aquatic creatures. Originally, they each led 2,000 searching dragon guards, which made a total of 8,000 people. However, in the 5-day search and rescue process, the 8,000 searching dragon guards were all dead. Even the thousands of aquatic creatures they had rescued were all dead. Now there were only 4 of them left, and they were unable to carry out the mission anymore. They could only leave the Black Ink Sea area at the fastest speed, and go to the neighboring Long Wind Sea area. After hearing the news, Ji Tianqing carefully looked at the 4 commanders of the searching dragon guards. He immediately found that the 4 commanders were also corroded by the strong poisonous black water. Their bodies were already covered with black smoke, and many parts of their skin had been festered, with black blood constantly flowing out. It seems that I was right. Even the Sky Origin stage powerhouses of the water tribe could not resist the corrosion of the strong poisonous black water. According to their situation, if they don't get rid of the strong poison as soon as possible, I am afraid that they will not live for more than half a month. The 4 commanders also knew this. Their expressions were extremely dejected and pained. Their dim eyes were filled with helplessness and despair. One of them nodded and bowed to Ji Tianqing. "Young Master Ji, the 4 of us have been poisoned, and we will not live for long. This place is hundreds of thousands of miles away from the Long Wind Sea area. If we don't get back in time, we will die on the way. Young Master Ji, please send a message for us. In any case, we have to bring the result and the news back, and report to the Black Ink Dragon King. Even if we are destined to die, we have to die in a meaningful way." Ji Tianqing calmly glanced at the 4 of them, and he saw that they all had the same expression, and their eyes were very determined. He waved his hand and said in a deep voice, "You don't have to be so depressed. I will take you to the Long Wind Sea area now, and meet with the Black Ink Dragon King." As he said, he waved his hand and put the 4 of them on the back of the black dragon. Then, the black dragon carried them through the cold bottom of the sea, and rushed to the Long Wind Sea area as fast as lightning. The black dragon was so fast that the 4 commanders of the searching dragon guards were stunned, and they were also quite excited. There were thousands of different races in the East Sea, and they were all called the aquatic creatures, and they were all under the jurisdiction of the Imperial Court of the Aquatic Creatures. In the East Sea, the flood dragon race was the noblest and the most powerful race. The 4 commanders of the searching dragon guards were just ordinary members of the sea, and they rarely came in contact with the noble flood dragon race. They did not dare to imagine that one day, they would be able to ride the noble black dragon and travel hundreds of thousands of miles under the sea. Even if the 4 of them were to die soon, it was still an incomparable glory and something to be proud of. A whole day passed quickly. The black dragon finally traveled 140,000 miles, left the poison-shrouded Black Ink Sea area, and entered the Long Wind Sea area. Under the guidance of the 4 commanders of the searching dragon guards, the black dragon rushed to the origin city at the fastest speed. It was an underwater ancient city at the edge of the Long Wind Sea area, and it was also the main city that accommodated millions of people of the Sea Clan. Most of the people of the Sea Clan who evacuated from the Black Ink Sea area fled there. The Black Ink Dragon King and a large number of searching dragon guards also gathered in that ancient city. Everyone thought that they would be safe after escaping from the Black Ink Sea area and arriving at the origin city. Chapter 1248. When Ji Tianqing saw the blood qi in the seawater, he had a bad feeling. It was clearly the blood qi and soul essence of the water clan's people, fish, and water demons after they died. Strands of dark red blood qi mixed in the black seawater and kept flowing into the distance. The poisonous black water has already spread to this part of the sea. The situation is probably worse than we expected. Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows and muttered with a solemn expression. Yunyao nodded and pointed at the ancient city in the darkness ahead. She said, Tianqing, look. The origin city is shining with magic power. It's obviously protected by a soul-level formation. The Black Ink Dragon King and a large group of searching dragon guards are in that ancient city. It should be fine in the short term. Let's go take a look first. Ji Tianqing nodded and let the black dragon swim towards the origin city. When he got closer, he could see clearly that the ancient city under the sea made of reddish-brown rocks was also covered with thick seaweed. Colorful corals grew everywhere in the city. A soul-level formation with a radius of nearly 100 miles protected the entire ancient city like an inverted bowl. The seawater outside the light shield was cold and black, containing deadly poison. The seawater inside the light shield was still pure and light blue. Tens of thousands of Water Clan martial artists, wearing silver armor and holding spears and swords, cruised in the sky above the ancient city and monitored the surroundings. Around 1 million water-kind people crowded in the city, letting out deafening noises. The black dragon arrived outside the city gate. The 4 searching dragon guards took out their identity badges and stated their purpose. Only then were they allowed to enter the city. However, the black dragon, Ji Tianqing, and Yunyao's identities were unknown, so the city guards refused to let them enter the origin city. The 4 searching dragon guards were a little angry and puzzled. They quickly introduced Ji Tianqing's identity and asked the city guards to let them in. However, the city guards were from the origin city and were under the jurisdiction of the Changfeng Sea region. They had nothing to do with the Black Ink Sea region. Of course, they would not listen to the words of the 4 searching dragon guard commanders and insisted on carrying out the orders of the city lord of origin city. In desperation, the 4 searching dragon guards had to apologize to Ji Tianqing and said that they would report this matter to Xianmo Dragon King after entering the city. Ji Tianqing didn't say much and waved his hand, indicating for the 4 to enter the city. He and Yunyao stood calmly on the black dragon's back, waiting patiently. Black Dragon's mood was somewhat gloomy. He said in a resentful tone, "Old Ji, this bunch of stinky fish really don't know what's good for them. How dare they treat us like this? We helped them with good intentions, but they actually refused to let us in. How despicable." Ji Tianqing shook his head and said calmly, "Little black dragon, you can't say that. Such a great disaster happened in the Black Ink Sea area, so the water-kind people must be scared to death. Right now, they were out of their wits, and every bush and tree was an enemy. Of course, they would be extremely cautious and wouldn't dare to be careless in the slightest. Don't worry, the 4 searching dragon guards have already gone to report the news. I believe Xianmo Dragon King is a reasonable person and will soon come to welcome us." Black Dragon was originally feeling indignant for Ji Tianqing, so when he saw that Ji Tianqing didn't care, the resentment in his heart dissipated. Yunyao raised her eyebrows and asked, "Tianqing, have you met Xianmo Dragon King? Does he know you?" Ji Tianqing shook his head. Yunyao suddenly frowned and said with some concern, "Xianmo Dragon King doesn't know you, so he won't believe us. How can he let us in? If Xianmo Dragon King doesn't take us into the city, I'm afraid there's nothing we can do to help the water-kind people get through this crisis. If we're left here all the time, I'm afraid we can only leave, and there's nothing we can do to help the water-kind people." Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head. "Believe me, that won't happen. Even if Xianmo Dragon King doesn't take us into the city, I have a communication jade slip here to contact Tai. As long as Tai gives the order, Xianmo Dragon King and the city master of the origin city will definitely listen to me." Yunyao felt relieved and didn't say anything more. Time passed quietly, and soon, half an hour had passed. Right at this moment, a burst of noise suddenly burst out on the road that connected to the city gate. The water-kind people who crowded on the road were driven away by 2 groups of armored and sword-carrying guards, and immediately dispersed. The road made of black stones was emptied out, and hundreds of guards stood on both sides of the road with respectful looks. Under the gaze of countless water-kind people, several imposing figures quickly walked through the black stone road and arrived at the tall city gate. There were 4 figures in total, and 3 of them were at the soul refining stage. The weakest middle-aged man was at the 7th level of the sky origin stage. The leader walking in the front was a tall and sturdy young man in a purple robe. His face was stern, and there was a golden dragon horn protruding from his forehead. His skin was also covered with golden dragon scales. Without a doubt, he was the prince of the imperial court, Golden Dragon Tai. The middle-aged man following behind Tai was also tall and sturdy, and his steps were like the wind. His skin was dark, and his eyes were like lightning. His whole body was emitting a noble and domineering aura unique to the dragon race. He was the leader of the imperial court's guards, Black Dragon Longyuan. The third middle-aged man was also a black dragon. He wore a black robe and a dark golden cloak. He was the master of Xian Mo region, Xian Mo Dragon King. As for the fourth person, he was an ordinary water-kind man, who was at the 7th level of the sky origin stage. He was the city master of the origin city. When Tai arrived at the city gate with Longyuan, Xian Mo Dragon King, and the city master of the origin city, all the guards and people near the city gate all knelt down and saluted respectfully. Tai ignored the guards and people around him, and his eyes were fixed on Ji Tianqing, who was outside the city's great defensive formation. When he saw that the person was indeed Ji Tianqing, his originally cold and stern expression became much warmer. He actually revealed a faint smile and cupped his hands towards Ji Tianqing, saying, "Brother Tianqing, just now, someone reported that you've come to Origin City." This sovereign still didn't dare to believe it. "I didn't expect you to come to Origin City. We meet again." Hearing Tai's words, Xian Mo Dragon King, the city master of the Origin City, and the guard captain's expressions all changed. They looked at Ji Tianqing in shock. They didn't dare to believe that this human youth not only knew Prince Tai, but also had such a close relationship with him. The noble Prince Tai actually called this person brother. His attitude was very warm. Just an hour ago, the guard captain's attitude was firm and refused to let this person into Origin City. Even an idiot knew that they would not have a good ending after insulting and offending Prince Tai's friend. Thinking of this, the guard captain and the dozen or so guards suddenly turned pale. Their eyes were filled with deep fear. Chapter 1249. Seeing the guards at the city gate kneeling down, the surrounding water tribe people immediately burst into a noisy discussion. Tai also stopped smiling and bowed to Ji Tianqing with a sincere expression, apologizing. "Brother Tianqing, these guards are weak and ignorant. They didn't know that a heaven's chosen like you had arrived, and offended you just now. I apologize to you on their behalf. Please be magnanimous and don't let this matter affect your mood." Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a smile, "Tai, you know that I won't lower myself to the same level as these shrimp soldiers, so you don't have to be so courteous. They are just following orders, so you don't have to make it too difficult for them. Let's get down to business. You'd better open the defensive formation quickly. We'll talk after we enter the city." Tai nodded when he saw that Ji Tianqing was so magnanimous. He turned to look at City Lord Yuan beside him. With a fierce look in his eyes, he shouted with a dignified tone, "City Lord Yuan, these guards have offended my good brother, and they deserve to be beheaded. However, this is a special time. Since young Master Ji has pleaded for them, I'll give them a lighter punishment. Break their arms and legs, and lock them in the prison. They can only be released after 3 months." City Lord Yuan bowed with a heart full of fear, then immediately sent someone to carry out the order. Not only did the guards not resist, but they also knelt on the ground as if relieved of a heavy burden, thanking Tai for sparing their lives. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao finally understood how strict the rules of the Water Clan were. Then, Black Ink Dragon King waved his hand and unleashed a dazzling golden light, activating the defensive formation. A light door opened on the five-colored light barrier, and the Black Dragon carried Ji Tianqing and Yunyao through the light door, entering Origin City. Countless people and guards on both sides of the road immediately bowed respectfully, welcoming Ji Tianqing into the city. Tai guessed Ji Tianqing's intention, and without wasting any time, he quickly led him into the city and rushed to the City Lord's mansion. The City Lord's mansion of Origin City was located in the center of the city. It was a huge palace built with brown rocks. The style of the cities and buildings of the Water Clan were different from those of the Human Clan and the Monster Clan. They were very special and ancient. Everyone entered the meeting hall. Tai, Ji Tianqing, and Yunyao took their seats. Black Ink Dragon King, City Lord Yuan, and a few Water Tribe generals were all standing respectfully in the main hall. After everyone exchanged greetings and bowed, Tai got down to business and asked Ji Tianqing, "Tianqing, why did you suddenly come to the Eastern Sea and even come to Origin City?" Ji Tianqing explained, "Several months ago, we left the central continent and prepared to head to the Eastern Sea's sinkhole to settle a matter. As they passed by the Eastern Sea, they happened to encounter the demon race's rebellion. They spread a highly toxic plague in the coastal cities, causing a world-shaking disaster. Tens of millions of people were affected, and millions were slaughtered. I helped Divine General Dong Lin uncover the source of the disaster and quelled the poisonous plague before rushing to the Eastern Sea. When I passed through the Xian Sea area, I saw that the sea was highly toxic, and billions of fish and people of the Water Clan died. I guessed that the Demon Clan was causing trouble. After discovering this situation, I planned to help. After all, I know a way to solve the disaster." Coincidentally, I met 4 commanders of the Searching Dragon Guards, so I brought them to Origin City. After listening to his explanation, Tai came to a realization. He was originally filled with worry and anxiety, but when he learned that Ji Tianqing could solve the disaster, he immediately let out a sigh of relief. His eyes were surging with joy. When I learned that a mysterious poison appeared in the Xian Sea area, causing the deaths of countless people, I hurried to deal with this matter. It has been 5 days, I have thought of all kinds of methods, but I am helpless. Tianqing, you actually know a way to solve the source of the disaster. That's great, you came at the right time. This time, you must help me. As long as you can solve this disaster, I and the Imperial Court of the Water Clan will forever remember your kindness." Black Ink Dragon King felt that it was inconceivable. He looked at Ji Tianqing in shock. "Young Master Ji, that mysterious poison is all-pervasive and extremely toxic. His Highness Tai and I have tried all kinds of methods, but we still couldn't find any useful clues. What method do you have to solve it?" The status of Origin City Lord was low, so he couldn't interrupt at this time. But the stone hanging in his heart was lifted. He looked at Ji Tianqing with eyes full of surprise and excitement, as if he had seen his savior. Ji Tianqing took a deep look at Tai and said in a low voice, "Tai, I believe you also know that the Demon Emperor used an ancient evil method to refine a large number of blood gods. Those blood gods carried the power of disaster and were spreading plagues on the battlefields of various races, causing a terrible disaster. Not only that, the Demon Emperor also sent a large number of elite demon kings to escort the blood gods into the territories of various races, using the disaster to massacre the people. The disaster in the Xian Sea area was caused by the blood gods and the demon race." Tai nodded and said with a solemn expression, "That's right, as early as 2 months ago, the frontier battlefield sent back this news. I checked the situation in the Xian Sea area, and it was exactly as you said. It was done by the demon race and the blood gods. However, no one expected that the blood gods would sneak into the hinterland of the East Sea and cause a disaster in our territory. The Xianmoc area has been corroded by a strong poison. At present, more than 50 million people have died, and more than 200 million people have been forced to flee their homes. Moreover, I have investigated and found that the source of the disaster is the mysterious black water. Unfortunately, the black water is spreading very fast in the sea. I can neither stop it nor find a way to deal with it. During this time, the pharmacists of the imperial court have been working like crazy, but they still can't make an effective antidote. Now that the poison has spread to the Long Wind area, if we don't find a way to stop it, the disaster will spread further. At that time, more than 100 million people will die because of it. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said in a low voice, "These are all minor details. If we want to resolve this disaster, the most direct and effective way is to find the blood gods and kill them." Xianmo Dragon King shook his head and sighed helplessly. "Young Master Ji, you are right. We also understand this point. However, we have never seen the blood gods, and we don't know their characteristics and flaws. How can we find them?" Tai Yi also had the same idea. He nodded with a solemn expression and said, "Yes, this is the biggest problem we are facing." Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and said in a serious tone, "Tai Yi, I probably know how to find the blood gods, but you have to cooperate with me to resolve this disaster as soon as possible." Tai Yi suddenly became spirited. He nodded without hesitation and said, "Okay. Tianqing, as long as you can help me find the blood gods, I will listen to your orders. For every hour we delay, the black water will spread thousands of miles and kill hundreds of thousands of people. There is no time to lose. Tianqing, you have to think of a way now." Chapter 1250. Although Tai Yi didn't know what Ji Tianqing was going to do exactly, he immediately ordered Castellan Yuan to do as Ji Tianqing asked. In just a few minutes, Castellan Yuan prepared a secret room and a detailed map of the Longwind Sea for Ji Tianqing. The secret room was under the Castellan's mansion. It was not only hidden but also very safe. Ji Tianqing only brought Yunyao, Tai Yi, and Long Yuan into the secret room. Black Ink Dragon King and Castellan Yuan could only wait outside and wait for orders. After entering the secret room, Ji Tianqing unrolled the map and spread it on the wide stone table. He stared at the map carefully and pondered with a serious expression. The secret room was very quiet. Tai Yi, Yunyao, and Long Yuan didn't make a sound for fear of disturbing Ji Tianqing. A moment later, Ji Tianqing finished looking at the map of the entire Longwind Sea and looked up at Tai Yi beside him. He said with a serious expression, "Tai Yi, after the poison disaster broke out in the Black Ink Sea, how many people were successfully evacuated?" Tai Yi answered honestly, "More than 50 million people died, and more than 200 million people were affected. However, less than 80 million people successfully escaped to the Longwind Sea. There was no doubt that more than 100 million people of the Water Clan were scattered to other places. It was unknown whether these people had escaped from the Black Ink Sea or if they were still alive." Ji Tianqing nodded and asked with a serious expression, "Then where did you settle those people?" Tai Yi said in a low voice, "There were too many people who suffered. I divided them into two groups and settled them in the Green Tooth Trench and the Long Mountain Grand Canyon. The Green Tooth Trench is 30,000 miles away from here. It's a huge trench that is 100,000 miles long. No people have ever lived there. The Long Mountain Grand Canyon is a little further, 80,000 miles away. It's also a huge canyon that is tens of thousands of miles long. It's like an abyss that can accommodate tens of millions of people. There are no cities in these two areas. It's always been a paradise for water demons and fish. I settled the people there and sent a large number of experts and searching dragon guards to protect them." Ji Tianqing shook his head and said in a serious tone, "Those experts and searching dragon guards are far from enough. Send Black Ink Dragon King and Long Yuan to guard these two places immediately." Tai was startled and immediately frowned as if he had guessed something. He frowned and looked at Ji Tianqing and asked, "Tianqing, do you suspect that the experts of the demon clan and blood god will sneak into those two camps to cause trouble?" "Of course." Ji Tianqing looked at him seriously and said with an unquestionable tone, "When I was searching for the blood god in the 100 cities of the East Sea, the blood god and the demon clan had been keeping an eye on the refugee camps. They had been wantonly spreading poisons and plagues that could kill millions of people at once. There were tens of millions of water to kill blood to kill demon s. The s was to cause kill. Most importantly, blood god created all kinds of disasters and killed tens of millions of people in order to absorb their blood and souls to increase his strength. In the Black Ink Sea, more than 50 million water tribe people have died. I estimate that blood god's strength has reached the soul refining realm." Tai's face turned gloomy and his heart was heavy. "If blood god's strength has reached the soul refining realm, won't we not be able to resist the poisonous black water?" Ji Tianqing nodded and said in a serious tone, "Soul refining realm experts will die if they are poisoned by the black water." Tai did not hesitate and immediately gave the order. He said in a dignified tone, "Long Yuan, I order you to rush to the Long Mountain Grand Canyon immediately. Take over the authority and lead 100,000 soldiers. Protect the people no matter what." Long Yuan immediately bowed and obeyed. When he turned and left the secret room and rushed to the Long Mountain Canyon, Tai gave another order to Black Ink Dragon King outside the secret room. Black Ink Dragon King obeyed and left Origin City as fast as he could, rushing to the Black Ink Sea Trench. Soon, the secret room was quiet again. Tai hesitated for a moment, looking as if he wanted to say something. Ji Tianqing saw that and asked, "Tai, if you have any questions, just ask." Tai did not hesitate and quickly asked, "Tianqing, the black dragon you rode in Origin City, was it the little black dragon from before?" "Yes." Ji Tianqing nodded and asked, "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" Tai's eyes flashed and he said in a strange tone, "Don't you think it's strange that the black dragon has changed so much?" Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. "It's a little strange, but it had a fortuitous encounter and recently reached the soul refining realm. It's natural for it to change like that, isn't it?" No. Tai quickly waved his hand and explained with a serious expression, "Tianqing, you don't know the Eastern Sea Scale Dragon clan and think that it's normal. In fact, none of the black dragons under the imperial court would look like that after reaching the soul refining realm. Its current appearance is not that of the Eastern Sea Scale Dragon clan." Ji Tianqing was startled and frowned in confusion. "Not the Eastern Sea Scale Dragon clan? Then what kind of clan is it?" Tai took a deep breath and his eyes flashed. He said in a serious tone, "Black Dragon. Divine Black Dragon. Divine Beast Black Dragon?" Ji Tianqing narrowed his eyes as a glint flashed across his eyes. He was quite shocked. He knew that the Eastern Sea Scale Dragon clan were all scale dragons, and there was a huge difference between scale dragons and the legendary divine dragons. In ancient times, there was a legend that a snake would live for 100 years to become a snake, 1,000 years to become a scale dragon, and 10,000 years to become a dragon. The legendary dragons were the true divine dragons of the 9 heavens. The dragons of the Eastern Sea Imperial Court were scale dragons. In the past 10,000 years, no one in the Eastern Sea Scale Dragon clan had been able to cultivate into a true dragon. Now, Tai was telling him that the little black dragon had revealed its true talent after reaching the soul refining realm. It was not an ordinary scale dragon, but a divine black dragon. This news filled Ji Tianqing's heart with shock and joy. Yunyao also found it unbelievable and was happy and excited. She quickly asked Tai, "In the entire Tianxian continent's 10,000 years of history, there has never been a true divine dragon. In the ancient legends, the divine dragon's talent and power are unparalleled in the world, and no other clan can match it. Is this true? Tai nodded solemnly and said, "Of course it's true." The ancients used dragons and phoenixes to describe the most outstanding geniuses, and dragons are ranked before phoenixes. The divine dragon is not only the most perfect and powerful clan, but also the most honorable clan. Tianqing, the black dragon, has only reached the soul refining realm, 2 levels lower than you. Chapter 1251. Without Tai Yi's reminder, Ji Tianqing also knew that the divine dragon's talent was perfect. In terms of cultivation comprehension and the speed at which they increased their strength, no race in the world could compare to the dragons. Now that the black dragon had awakened its divine beast bloodline and revealed the characteristics of the divine dragon, its talent and potential were completely unleashed. Without a doubt, the black dragon would become the most dazzling star in the world, illuminating the sky of this continent. When Tai talked about the black dragon, his eyes shone with a bright light, revealing a strong sense of envy and desire. Although it was a noble golden dragon, it was only a flood dragon. It still needed to cultivate for thousands of years before it could become a true dragon. If the black dragon was not Ji Tianqing's pet, he would have snatched it long ago. Even if he did not have any evil thoughts, the imperial court of the aquatics would use the most forceful method to take the black dragon back. After all, the black dragon had just awakened its divine beast bloodline and was still very weak. It was only at the first tier of the soul refining realm. However, the black dragon belonged to Ji Tianqing. Tai Yi had to keep his promise and not make an enemy out of his brother. Then, Tai Yi told Ji Tianqing Yunyao about the legend of the divine beast black dragon. It is recorded in the history books of the dragon clan that a divine dragon has not appeared in the mysterious sky continent for tens of thousands of years. The divine dragon of the 9 heavens, who can control the gods, does not exist on this continent. Leaving this continent and pursuing the ultimate realm of martial arts is the dream of all martial artists. However, among the billions of martial artists, only a few can realize their dreams. Famous geniuses like you and me might not be able to achieve our dreams. However, it is different now. Tianqing, you have the help of the divine beast black dragon. In the future, you will definitely be able to leave this continent and break free from the cage and shackles. You will see the wider world and strive for the divine realm of martial arts. Tai Yi's tone was very excited. When he said this, his blood was boiling. He was extremely envious of Ji Tianqing. Fortunately, he was the prince of the aquatics and had a noble status. He had always been cold and calm. If it were an ordinary person, they would have gone crazy with envy and jealousy. Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded, comforting him. Tai Yi, there's no need to be so depressed. You and I are both the top geniuses of the continent. If I can leave this continent and enter the mysterious Shenwu continent, then I believe that you can achieve your wish as well. Thank you for your kind words. I hope so. Tai Yi smiled and nodded. After that, everyone changed the topic and stopped talking about the black dragon. Tai Yi Ji Tianqing asked, Tianqing, apart from letting Black Ink Dragon King and Longyuan protect the 2 refugee camps, what other plans and arrangements do you have? Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a while, then said seriously, we are in the open, while the Blood God and the Demon Clan are hiding in the dark. This is not good for us. However, the Blood God and the Demon Clan didn't know that I was here, nor did they know that I knew the Blood God's characteristics and purpose. Therefore, I am sure that they will attack the Green Tooth Trench or the Long Mountain Grand Canyon. Just relying on Black Ink Dragon King and Longyuan to protect the refugees is far from enough. We need to hurry over and guard the place. Tai Yi thought for a while and then said, the situation in the Long Mountain Grand Canyon is more complicated, and it's further from here. I will go there personally. I will oversee the situation there, and with Longyuan assisting me, it will be easier for me to do things. Tianqing, you and Yunyao will go to the Green Tooth Trench, which is closer. I will send a message to Black Ink Dragon King and have him listen to your orders. You will be in charge of everything. Also, Origin City Lord will guard Origin City. If anything happens, you will need to provide timely assistance. Tai Yi was more familiar with the Water Tribe situation, and he was good at arranging troops and taking charge of the overall situation. He arranged these tasks one by one, appearing to have a well-thought-out plan. He was methodical and had the air of a general. Ji Tianqing had no objections and nodded in agreement. All right, we will do as you say. After discussing the plan, the two exchanged transmission jade slips. If there was any situation or news, they would use the jade slips to inform each other. After everything was ready, Tai Yi took the lead and left Origin City, heading straight for the Long Mountain Grand Canyon. Ji Tianqing was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he sat cross-legged in the secret chamber, preparing to meditate and cultivate. Seeing this, Yunyao asked doubtfully, Tianqing, aren't we going to the Green Tooth Trench? Are you going to cultivate for a few more days? Ji Tianqing shook his head lightly and said in a serious tone, of course we have to go to the Green Tooth Trench, and we have to go there as soon as possible. However, there is something that we have to clarify as soon as possible. Previously, when I was in the 100 cities of the Eastern Sea, I used the Heaven-Mending Orb to devour all the poisonous plagues, so the Heaven-Mending Orb's power is very weak. For the past half a month, the Heaven-Mending Orb has been purifying those poisonous plagues, and now it is finally done. The strange thing is, not only did the Heaven-Mending Orb recover its previous luster, its power has also increased a lot, and it is continuously pouring mysterious power into my soul. Since yesterday, my soul's power has been constantly increasing, and my strength is also steadily increasing. Yunyao revealed a surprised expression and asked in disbelief, the Heaven-Mending Orb actually has this kind of effect? Purifying the poisonous plagues and increasing your strength? Isn't this too heaven-defying? Tianqing, you have to be more careful. Carefully examine the power that the Heaven-Mending Orb is channeling and see if it has any negative effects on you. After all, that orb is very mysterious. We don't know its origin and specific effects at all. Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a smile, don't worry, I will carefully examine it. After saying that, he did not say anything else and quickly sat down to meditate and carefully observe the situation of his soul. In his mind, there was a cloud-like chaotic area, and a golden sword of soul floated in it. Around the golden sword of soul, there were 3 blazing white swords of soul. They were all divine weapons filled with soaring sword intent. And above the golden sword of soul, there was a milky white orb. It was the Heaven-Mending Orb. From the mysterious Heaven-Mending Orb, a blazing white pillar of light extended and connected to the golden sword of soul, continuously pouring in a majestic mysterious power. This mysterious power was very similar to the power of the soul. It made Ji Tianqing's soul feel comfortable without any discomfort. He carefully observed for a moment, but did not sense the aura of the devil race or the power of calamity. And his golden sword of soul was very close to this mysterious white light. It felt joy and intimacy from the depths of his soul. Ji Tianqing could not see any clues or sense any danger, so he ended his inner vision and channeling. As soon as he finished his meditation and stood up, Yunyao looked at him with a face full of concern and asked, Tianqing, how is it? Is there any problem? There is no abnormality. There should be no problem. Ji Tianqing shook his head and persuaded, I once read a secret scroll of the Tian-Xian continent. It recorded an ancient myth. According to the ancient book, the gods of different races clashed and broke the sky, inadvertently connecting to another world. Because of this, the devil race escaped from that world and swarmed to the Tian-Xian continent. The Heaven-Mending Orb in my body seems to be a treasure of a powerful god in the 9 heavens. It was borrowed by the gods to fix the hole in the sky. Chapter 1252. Yunyao had only heard Ji Tianqing mention the heaven-mending pearl, but she didn't know much about it. Now that she knew the origin of this item, she was shocked but also relieved. After the two finished their preparations, they walked out of the secret room and quickly left Origin City. Outside the city, Ji Tianqing let out the black dragon and rode it with Yunyao, rushing towards the Green Tooth Trench. From Origin City to the Green Tooth Trench, there were no signs of the Water Tribe citizens, only countless bones and corpses on the bottom of the sea. The deadly poison that filled the seawater, as well as strands of blood qi, were spreading and flowing continuously. Yunyao silently observed the situation at the bottom of the sea and frowned for a long time. Before they reached the Green Tooth Trench, a thought appeared in her mind and she couldn't help but say to Ji Tianqing, "Tianqing, currently, more than 50 million Water Tribe citizens have died in the Black Ink Sea region. If the blood god swallowed the blood energy of these citizens, then not only would it break through to the soul refinement realm, it would also reach the 6th or 7th level of the soul refinement realm, right?" Ji Tianqing was startled and nodded. According to common sense, it should be so. But we haven't seen the blood god yet, so we can't be sure. Yunyao shook her head and said with certainty, "I don't think so. The Water Tribe is different from the human tribe. The Water Tribe is a cold-blooded race and their cultivation system is different from the human tribe. The blood energy of the Water Tribe is much weaker than that of the human tribe. If the blood god swallowed the blood energy of 50 million Water Tribe citizens, it would only be equivalent to swallowing 10 million human tribe citizens." Ji Tianqing's eyes lit up and he nodded. "That makes sense. If that's the case, then the blood god's strength is at most at the 2nd or 3rd level of the soul refinement realm. It won't be ridiculously strong." Yunyao nodded slightly and said calmly, "This is only the current strength. If the blood god continues to kill tens of millions of Water Tribe citizens, its strength will definitely increase dramatically. Don't worry, we will personally guard the Green Tooth Trench. We won't let the blood god have a chance," Ji Tianqing said confidently. A quarter of an hour later, the black dragon arrived at the Green Tooth Trench. When they were still dozens of miles away, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao saw a huge chasm in the dark seabed ahead of them. It was a north-south trench about 100 miles wide, and was said to be tens of thousands of miles long. This mysterious oceanic trench had existed since ancient times and had been preserved to this day. No one knew how this trench was formed. But on the surface, it looked very much like a huge sword mark left behind by a deity slashing the bottom of the sea with a sword. On both sides of the trench were rugged reefs, colorful coral reefs, and lush aquatic plants. Large numbers of fishes and sea monsters gathered in this place, but after tens of millions of aquatic creatures migrated to this place, those fishes and sea monsters all fled. The black dragon twisted its huge body and quickly dived into the trench, swimming toward the depths of the trench. The trench was bottomless, and the rocky cliffs on both sides were like cliffs, covered with clumps of seaweed and strips of corals. The rocky cliffs contained rich mineral resources that were sparkling, bringing a glimmer of light to the dark trench. The black dragon dived almost 100 miles deep into the sea before it reached the deepest part of the trench and saw the situation at the bottom. The bottom of the wide trench was made of extremely hard black rocks. Rugged black rocks were everywhere, protruding and stacking irregularly. The black dragon swam forward for thousands of miles before a series of noises came from the front, breaking the tranquility of the trench. When they got closer, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao finally saw that the place where the victims of the disaster were gathered was right in front of them. Groups of waterkind warriors, who were wearing armors and holding weapons, had been patrolling around the refugee camp. Inside the refugee camp, the aquatic creatures were gathered in groups of 3 to 5, discussing with each other, or huddling inside the rocks. There were no temporary houses in this area. There were only some scattered caves and natural rock clusters for the aquatic creatures to live in. Ji Tianqing released his god soul power and probed into the depths of the trench. He saw hundreds of thousands of aquatic creatures gathered in an area with a radius of dozens of miles. Everyone was filled with worry and depression. The refugee camp was filled with an atmosphere of sadness and despair. The discussions, cries, and quarrels of the people gathered into a flood of sound waves, echoing in the trench. Seeing this, Shi Yan and Yunyao were also affected. They were depressed and anxious. At the very least, the human refugees have built houses and set up defensive formations. However, these aquatic creatures can only gather in this trench. They don't even have a place to hide. If the blood god sneaks into this place and releases the poisonous black water, the consequences will be unimaginable. Ji Tianqing stood on the back of the black dragon, looking down at the aquatic creatures in the depths of the trench and speaking with a serious face. Yunyao nodded and said in a low voice, "The aquatic creatures are different from the human race. They don't need houses or buildings to survive in the trench for a long time. The bottom of the sea is their home. This trench is too huge, and tens of millions of people are affected by the disaster. How difficult is it to build a defensive formation? Without the protection of the soul-level defensive formation, with only those aquatic creatures patrolling, the defensive formation is useless. Even if the blood god doesn't come here to create a disaster, the poisonous black water will still cause a great number of casualties." Ji Tianqing didn't say anything else. He rode the black dragon and moved back and forth in the trench, heading to the center of the refugee camp. A quarter of an hour later, the black dragon had moved forward for over 1,000 miles and finally found Xian Mo Dragon King. Xian Mo Dragon King had dug a huge cave on the rock wall of the trench, which served as a temporary command center for the refugee camp. When Ji Tianqing arrived, Xian Mo Dragon King had just gathered over 30 aquatic generals to discuss the defense plan of the refugee camp. Seeing Ji Tianqing and Yunyao arrive, Xian Mo Dragon King was obviously relieved. He announced in front of everyone, "Generals, young Master Ji is the #1 genius of the continent, and is also a good brother of Prince Tai Yi. Prince Tai Yi has just given the order that young Master Ji will personally guard the Green Tooth Trench. Everyone and I will follow his orders and arrangements." All the generals didn't dare to have any objection. They immediately knelt down and bowed to Ji Tianqing, and shouted in unison, "Greetings, young Master Ji. We will follow young Master Ji's order." Ji Tianqing didn't waste any time. He said with a dignified voice, "When I came here, I saw the situation of the refugee camp. The defense force is empty, and the situation of the people is terrible. We must start to build the defensive formation right away, so that we can protect the people and avoid a disaster. There are over 20 million people, occupying at least 2,000 miles of land. We must build 20 soul-level defensive formations." When Xian Mo Dragon King and the other generals heard this, they all showed a troubled look and started to discuss. "Young Master Ji, this task is too difficult. It can't be done in a short time. It will take at least 2 days to build one soul-level defensive formation. 20 of them will take at least a month. Young Master Ji, we won't have enough time. If we spend more than a month to build the defensive formations, I'm afraid that all the people will be dead before the defensive formations are finished." Seeing that everyone was against it, Ji Tianqing glanced at them with a dignified look, and ordered with a resolute and decisive tone, "This is my order. No one can disobey it, or they will be beheaded. I will build the defensive formation myself, and with the help of Yunyao, Xian Mo Dragon King and Black Dragon, the foundation and framework of the soul-level defensive formation can be built quickly." Chapter 1253. Ji Tianqing's words made Xian Mo Dragon King and the other generals dumbfounded. Finish the mission in 3 days? Isn't that too much? Young Master Ji, please forgive me for speaking bluntly. This mission is impossible. It should have taken more than a month to finish the mission. If you can finish it in 3 days, it will be a miracle. Xian Mo Dragon King and the other generals stared at Ji Tianqing, hoping that he would take back his words. However, Ji Tianqing didn't change his expression. He shouted, "It's about the lives of more than 20 million people. Even if the mission is as difficult as climbing to the sky, it must be completed. You are all Water Tribe soldiers. If you can't even protect the people under your command, you might as well commit suicide. Military orders must be obeyed. Carry it out immediately." With that, he led Yunyao and the Black Dragon out of the cavern, heading outside. Xian Mo Dragon King and the other generals were shocked by his imposing manner and words. They didn't dare to say anything. After all, Ji Tianqing was the commander, but he took the lead to carry out the mission. Even if the mission was extremely difficult and impossible to finish, no one dared to say anything. Everyone was hoping that Ji Tianqing could really create a miracle. With that in mind, Xian Mo Dragon King and the other generals immediately went to gather all the Sky Origin Stage soldiers. After about half an hour, all the Sky Origin Stage powerhouses in the Green Tooth Trench were gathered in front of Ji Tianqing. Including more than 30 generals, there were more than 50 Sky Origin Stage powerhouses. Ji Tianqing started from the south of the trench. He used a powerful formation to set up the base of the formation at the bottom of the trench. He was going to build a defensive formation. The formation he was going to set up was called the Blackwater North Pole Formation. It was a low-grade soul-level formation with the help of the black water of the North Pole. The Green Tooth Trench was located in the northeast of the East Sea. There was an endless amount of seawater that could provide the black water of the North Pole. Once the formation was set up successfully, it could last for at least 100 years, unless the seawater in the area dried up. Without a doubt, this formation was most suitable to be set up in the Green Tooth Trench. The structure was not complicated, and the power of the formation was not ordinary. In order to speed up the construction of the formation, Ji Tianqing even took out over 10,000 energy stones and tens of rare and precious gemstones from his spatial ring. With the help of Black Dragon, Yunyao, and Black Ink Dragon King, it only took him an hour to set up the base and structure of the North Pole Formation. The rest of the work was left to the 50 Sky Origin Stage cultivators. They would fill in the veins of the formation until it was finished. It was easy for Sky Origin Stage cultivators to do it. More than 50 Heaven Origin Stage cultivators worked together and completed the task in less than 2 hours. When the first Mystic Water North Pole Array was successfully activated, the depths of the dark trench shone with brilliant gold and silver brilliance. An icy blue light shield covered an area of 100 miles, protecting the millions of aquatic creatures. In just over 2 hours, everyone had set up a soul-level grand array. This was definitely a miracle. All the generals and civilians witnessed the birth of a miracle with their own eyes. They were excited and cheered. At the same time, Ji Tianqing, Yunyao, Black Dragon, and the rest had finished setting up the base and structure of the second Mystic Water North Pole Array. More than 50 Sky Origin Stage cultivators did not dare to waste any time. They all rushed to complete the second formation excitedly. Next, they set up one formation after another in the trench at a speed of one formation every 2 hours. Originally, the trench was filled with sadness and desperation. Tens of millions of civilians were depressed, waiting for death to come. However, when they saw the formations rising from the ground one after another, it was as if they saw the hope of life. Their eyes were lit with hope. Time passed quickly. Batch after batch of aquatic creatures entered the newly built Mystic Water North Pole Array and waited peacefully. In the hearts of the civilians, the Soul-Level Grand Array and the Soul-Level Grand Array were invincible protection. As long as they were protected by the Soul-Level Grand Array, they would be safe even if disaster struck. Only Ji Tianqing, Tai, and the rest knew the truth. They would not spread it. Once the 50 million civilians knew the truth, it would definitely lead to an uncontrollable riot. The consequences would be severe. Before they knew it, 24 hours had passed. In a day, 12 mystic water North Pole arrays had emerged from the depths of the trench. 12 million civilians were protected. Ji Tianqing was mainly in charge of setting up the base and structure of the formations. He was using up a lot of his mana and mind. He was getting more and more tired. His mana and soul were weakening rapidly. He was so tired that his face was pale and he was covered in sweat. Yunyao felt sorry for him. She tried to persuade him to stop and rest several times. However, he persevered. Even if he was exhausted, he had to set up the formations as fast as he could. Finally, another day had passed. A full 48 hours was not a long time for the commoners, and it passed very quickly. However, for Ji Tianqing and the generals, it was a torturous process. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing had succeeded in creating a miracle. He had set up 20 mystic water North Pole arrays in a row. Unfortunately, he was so tired that his body was limp. His mana was almost depleted. His soul was so exhausted that he was about to pass out. Yunyao, Xian Dragon King, and the generals were not as desperate as him. However, they were also panting heavily. Their minds and energy were very weak. When the 20 mystic water North Pole arrays were set up, 20 million civilians were transferred into the Grand Array. When they were protected, everyone burst into cheers. Over 20 million civilians and over 50 Sky Origin Stage warriors were all shouting and cheering Ji Tianqing's name. Everyone was shocked by this inconceivable miracle, and they prostrated themselves in worship of Ji Tianqing. Young Master Ji, you are indeed the #1 genius of the continent. You are a rare genius. In just 2 days, you have set up 20 soul-level grand arrays. This is definitely a miracle that has never happened before. No wonder young Master Ji was so insistent and gave the order so confidently. It turns out that he really does have the strength to do so. I used to know that Prince Tai Yi was the #1 genius of the Water Tribe. No other geniuses in the world could compare with him. However, after seeing young Master Ji's horrifying power, I know that there is always someone better than you. It is our honor to fight side by side with young Master Ji and set up the grand arrays for the civilians. Young Master Ji, on behalf of the millions of people in the Xianmoc, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to you. You are the savior of the Xianmoc, a great hero. Under the leadership of Xian Dragon King, the 50 Heaven Origin Stage cultivators and millions of civilians all knelt down to thank Ji Tianqing. Chapter 1254. The Black Ink Dragon King and the 50 Sky Origin Stage soldiers admired Ji Tianqing to the extreme. The 20 million people who were affected by the disaster were also grateful to Ji Tianqing and sang his praises. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao were both excited and they saw the worshipping scene in the trench. They felt a strong sense of pride in their hearts. Ji Tianqing was also full of emotions. He felt that all the effort he had put in was worth it. However, his spiritual power were almost exhausted. He needed to rest and adjust his breathing. He only said a few words to the Black Ink Dragon King and then quickly returned to the temporary command post on the cliff. He found a secret room to meditate and cultivate. He sat in the secret room and took a few soul-level elixirs and consumed a lot of spiritual stones to recover his spiritual power. As for the spiritual power, it was hard to recover in a short period of time by meditating and cultivating. Luckily, he had the heaven-mending orb, which continuously poured in the mysterious white light to replenish his spiritual power. He believed that it would take at most 3 days for him to replenish and recover the magic power and soul energy he had consumed. After Ji Tianqing meditated and cultivated, the Black Ink Dragon King, Yunyao, and the Black Dragon still didn't dare to relax and rest. They took the elixirs to recover their spiritual power and then patrolled around the trench to monitor the situation outside. They didn't dare to lower their guard. They had to be cautious. About 20 hours later, the seawater around the trench started to turn black. The seawater became colder and darker. Apparently, the poisonous black water was coming. The patrolling Sky Origin stage soldiers immediately reported to the Black Ink Dragon King when they saw this. When the Black Ink Dragon King heard the news, his face suddenly changed. He became nervous and his spirit was tense. He hurriedly ordered the guards in the 20 formations to work together to activate the power of the Mystic Water North Pole Formation and resist the corrosion of the poisonous black water with all their might. The blue light shield of the formation became brighter and brighter. Its defensive power was also strengthened. Even though the poisonous black seawater kept eroding the light shield of the formation, it couldn't penetrate the formation in a short period of time. Seeing this scene, Black Ink Dragon King and the other generals heaved a sigh of relief. Only then did the hearts of the more than 20 million people settle back into their stomachs. They were even more grateful to Ji Tianqing. Unknowingly, 2 days had passed. The guards and martial practitioners took turns to inject true essence into the Mystic Water North Pole Formation to maintain its power. The poisonous black water was unable to seep into the formation, and the people in the formation were safe and sound. The atmosphere in the trench calmed down, and the people were no longer worried about their lives. Many people were even fantasizing and discussing that the poisonous black water wouldn't last for long. In at most half a month, the poisonous black water would fade away. As long as everyone persevered for half a month, they would be able to leave the Green Tooth Trench and return to their homes in the Black Ink Sea region. The situation had stabilized, and everything was in order. Ji Tianqing also ended his cultivation. His magic power and divine soul were restored to their peak state. He walked out of the temporary command post and personally walked around the trench twice to check the defensive power of the 20 formations. Only when he saw that the formation was intact and that the poison was unable to penetrate the light shield of the formation did he feel relieved. However, a few hours later, when he was having a meeting with the Black Ink Dragon King, he suddenly received a communication jade slip. The communication jade slip was wrapped in a bright white light. It quickly flew in front of him and landed in his palm. After the white light faded, a dark green jade slip appeared in his hand. When he saw the jade slip clearly, his expression changed and he frowned. Because this was the communication jade slip he had left for Tai Yi. He had a bad feeling in his heart. He quickly released his divine soul power and entered the jade slip to check the message. He saw that there was only one short sentence in the jade slip, and the tone was very urgent. Tianqing, the blood god sun has sneaked into the canyon. The disaster has begun. Come and help. When he saw this message, Ji Tianqing's expression changed drastically. His eyes flashed with a cold light. I guessed right. The blood god sun has really invaded the Long Mountain Canyon. He had already predicted that the Green Tooth Trench and the Long Mountain Canyon were the targets of the blood god sun. He did his best and only used 2 days to set up 20 defensive arrays in the Green Tooth Trench. As long as the blood god sun was not stupid, he would not choose to attack the Green Tooth Trench. The gains would not make up for the losses. And the Long Mountain Canyon was the only choice for the blood god sun. The communication jade slip from Tai Yi was also within his expectations. He was not surprised at all. Ji Tianqing was only stunned for a moment, and then he immediately put away the jade slip and walked out with large strides. As he walked out, he ordered in a deep voice, Black Ink Dragon King, I leave the Green Tooth Trench to you. Even if you have to sacrifice your life, you have to protect this place. Black Ink Dragon King's expression changed. He immediately got up and asked with concern, Young Master Ji, what happened? Has His Highness been attacked? Ji Tianqing walked out of the temporary command post and said in a low voice, the demon race has invaded the Long Mountain Canyon. The disaster has broken out. I have to go and help as soon as possible. Black Ink Dragon King said without hesitation, Young Master Ji, I will go with you. I swear to protect His Highness Tai Yi. Nonsense. You stay here. Ji Tianqing stared at him and shouted in a dignified tone, protecting the Green-Tooth Trench is your mission. If anything happens to the people, you will be punished. Black Ink Dragon King suddenly stopped. He looked embarrassed and didn't dare to say anything more. Ji Tianqing didn't stop. He summoned the Black Dragon and took Yunyao on its back. They flew out of the Green-Tooth Trench as fast as lightning. Swoosh! The Black Dragon also burst out with its strongest power. It turned into a mysterious black light and carried Ji Tianqing and Yunyao to the Long Mountain Canyon at the fastest speed. At the same time, the Long Mountain Canyon tens of thousands of miles away was in an extremely chaotic disaster. This canyon was located in the depths of the sea. It was located in the mountains. In the eyes of ordinary people, the bottom of the sea was flat or covered with mud and sand. But that was only the shallow sea area. In the deep sea area, there were also flat lands, mountains, trenches, and other mysterious terrains. Around the Long Mountain Canyon was a mountain range with a radius of 80,000 miles. Hundreds of underwater mountain ranges and peaks slept forever in the cold and dark bottom of the sea. There were no plants, flowers, or trees on those magnificent mountain peaks. There were only bare rocks. Dark green algae grew on the rock layer, and colorful coral reefs covered it. In the depths of the mountain range, there was a huge canyon tens of thousands of miles long. It was so deep that the bottom couldn't be seen. It was dark and mysterious. This mysterious huge canyon was like a chasm created by a god with a giant axe. It split the mountains tens of thousands of miles in half. The deep canyon was hundreds of miles deep. There wasn't a trace of light for many years. Only the smartest fish and the most powerful sea demons would reside here. Since 10 days ago, more than 20 million people of the sea tribe migrated here. The entire canyon became a refugee camp. Chapter 1255. When the Black Dragon carried Ji Tianqing and Yunyao into the Long Mountain Grand Canyon, what they saw was a tragic scene. In the deep and dark canyon, the seawater was black and contained a terrifying poison. A large number of aquatic tribe citizens were running in a hurry in the canyon, desperately trying to escape. However, as they ran, their bodies were corroded by the poisonous seawater and were corroding at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a few seconds, batch after batch of aquatic tribe citizens were corroded into black blood and dirty water, leaving only skeletons at the bottom of the sea. On the ground of the canyon, hundreds of thousands of white skeletons were piled up into small mountains. It was a shocking sight. The screams and wails of the citizens, the piles of skeletons, and the thick smell of blood in the seawater outlined a tragic scene of disaster. Under the corrosion of the poisonous black water, both the unarmed aquatic tribe citizens and the armored aquatic tribe guards were equally weak. They had no power to resist at all and could only die in despair and pain. Under Ji Tianqing's urging, the Black Dragon used its fastest speed and rushed into the depths of the Long Mountain Grand Canyon. Along the way, Ji Tianqing's soul detected two figures that were as black as ink hiding in a secluded corner of the Grand Canyon, secretly releasing deadly black water. He immediately realized that they must be the elite demon lords who were escorting the blood god. Seeing this, the Black Dragon's eyes flashed coldly. It swung its dragon tail and rushed over. Swoosh! It rushed to the top of a pile of jagged rocks and looked down at the rocks. The two elite demon lords disguised themselves as black squids and were hiding in the rocks. They were using the purpline demonic gourd to release endless black water. Roar! The Black Dragon's eyes shone fiercely as it let out a low roar. The two elite demon lords were immediately alerted. They quickly put away the purpline demonic gourd and wanted to escape underground. The Black Dragon opened its mouth without hesitation and spat out two black water pillars. They carried the power of the northern underworld black water and blasted at the two demon lords. In the blink of an eye, the two terrifying northern underworld black water pillars slammed into the rock cluster, covering an area with a radius of thousands of feet. Boom! Boom! Amidst the deafening noise, the pitch-black rocks on the ground were shattered into pieces, turning into gravel that covered the sky and the earth, splashing in all directions. The two elite demon kings could not escape the fate of being killed by the northern underworld black water pillar. The two of them didn't have time to change back to their demon king forms before they were blasted into pieces by the powerful northern underworld black water and scattered in the sea. Even though they were all at the 8th level of Sky Origin stage, and they knew the demonic arts, they could use all kinds of powerful martial skills and demonic skills. However, all of this was useless. Under the divine beast Black Dragon's northern underworld Blackwater, they were as weak as ants and were instantly killed. Within a radius of 3,000 meters, all the rocks, which were 10 times harder than steel, disappeared. A huge crater was left in the ground, and the ground was still trembling, stirring up countless stones and dust. The seawater within a radius of 5 kilometers had turned murky, making it impossible to see anything clearly. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and grabbed the purpline magic gourds that were scattered in the sea. The black dragon turned around and rushed into the depths of the canyon to find Tai and Long Yuan. Ji Tianqing stood on the dragon's back, holding the purpline magic gourd in his left hand and urging the power of the heaven-mending orb with his right hand, releasing a dense mysterious white light. The white light quickly swallowed the poisonous black water in the magic gourd, turning it into wisps of black qi that all flowed into the heaven-mending orb. After a short 100 breaths, when the black dragon rushed to the center of the refugee camp, Ji Tianqing had also swallowed all the poisonous black water in the purpline magic gourd. He looked down at the refugee camp below and saw a few defensive formations scattered around. Those formations were all low-grade soul-level formations, covering a radius of dozens of miles. There were no less than 1 million people of the sea race crowded inside. The people inside the formations saw with their own eyes that the people outside the formations were dying tragically at an extremely fast speed, turning into piles of white bones. Everyone was terrified, panicked, and desperate, making a huge commotion. The dazzling light barrier of the formations couldn't bear the burden because too many people were stuffed inside. In addition to the corrosion and infiltration of the poisonous black water, the light barrier of the formations dimmed and was on the verge of collapse. Clearly, Tai and Long Yuan had set up several soul-level formations to protect the people after guarding the canyon of Long Mountain. Unfortunately, their attainments in formations were not as heaven-defying as Ji Tianqing's. In just a few days, they could only set up a few formations to protect close to 10 million people of the sea race. The remaining 10 million people, without the protection of the formations, could only die tragically when the disaster erupted. What a miserable scene! Corpses littered the ground and blood flowed like water. Ji Tianqing's eyes almost popped out of their sockets, but there was nothing he could do. The entire canyon was in chaos, and the poisonous black water was everywhere within 10,000 miles. More than 10 million people died one after another, emitting a dark red blood mist that covered the sky and dyed the water in the canyon red. He anxiously searched the refugee camp, but he couldn't find Tai and Long Yuan. Of course, he couldn't find any trace of the blood god or the elite demon kings either. Yunyao's face was very gloomy, and she asked anxiously, "Tianqing, what should we do? Should we save the people first?" Ji Tianqing shook his head and said helplessly, "How can we save them? The entire canyon is covered by the poisonous black water, and more than 10 million people need to be saved. How can we save them? The most important thing now is to find Tai and Long Yuan as soon as possible and find the blood god." Then, he ordered the black dragon, "Little black dragon, continue to the depths of the canyon. You must find Tai." The black dragon obeyed and immediately sped up towards the depths of the canyon. An hour later, it had flown 6,000 miles away from the refugee camp. At this time, it suddenly saw the black water in front of it, flashing with colorful magic power. There were also bursts of muffled sounds, as well as the fluctuations of boundless mana, coming from the seawater. Clearly, there were soul refinement realm cultivators fighting in front of it. Ji Tianqing's eyes lit up, and he looked forward expectantly. Without his order, the black dragon sped up and headed straight for the sea. In the blink of an eye, the black dragon had traveled hundreds of miles and arrived at the edge of the battlefield. In the dark canyon, there were two groups of powerful cultivators fighting with their lives on the line. One of them was a water tribe cultivator, and the leader was a 1,000-meter-long dark golden flood dragon. Its body was huge and muscular, and it was covered in a layer of golden light. It kept releasing powerful secret techniques of the dragon tribe, and it looked very domineering. The other soul refinement realm cultivator fighting side by side with it was a 1,000-meter-long black flood dragon. It kept spitting out black dragon breath and attacked with all its might. These two flood dragons were Tai and Long Yuan. Chapter 1256. Ji Tianqing could tell at a glance that the ever-changing black mist was the blood god's son. The 4 demon race experts were all escorting the blood god's son. What surprised him was that there were only 3 elite demon kings among the 4 demon race experts. The leader was the strongest, reaching the 4th level of the spirit refining realm. Such strength was enough to become a demon commander in the demon race. This person was 4 meters tall, dark all over, and strong like a bull. 2 long curved horns protruded from his forehead. His nostrils were flat, and his mouth was wide. Black mist surged all over his body, giving off powerful demon qi. He fought side by side with the blood god, forcing Tai and Long Yuan to retreat. They weren't a match at all. Tai was weaker, only at the 1st level of the spirit refining realm. But while Long Yuan was fighting, he was still carefully protecting him. Therefore, the two sides had been fighting for a long time, but Tai had only been lightly injured. Long Yuan's injuries were very serious, and he looked miserable. His 1,000-meter-long black dragon body was covered in wounds and holes of various sizes, revealing the dragon bones and internal organs inside. Dark red blood continuously gushed out from the wound, dyeing the surrounding seawater red. Other than Tai and Long Yuan, there were 4 other Sky Origin Realm Water Race generals beside them. They were fighting with the other 3 elite demon kings, and it was very dangerous. They could die at any time. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing rode on the black dragon and charged toward the blood god and the demon marshal at lightning speed. Kill! Without needing Ji Tianqing to say anything, he pulled out the sword of burial of heaven, roared, and slashed at the blood god. Drawl, the sword of burial of heaven suddenly shone with dazzling cold light and slashed out diagonally from bottom to top. The cold light of the sword, 30 meters long, slashed at the blood god with a sharp power that could destroy everything. With a muffled bang, the ever-changing black fog was cut into pieces by the sword light and spread in all directions. Yunyao took out her treasured sword and shot out dozens of bright silver moon sword auras towards the ox-head demon commander. The black dragon also charged forward without any regard for its own safety. It waved its huge dragon claws and spat out a jet of northern underworld black water, charging towards the demon commander. The ox-head demon commander sensed that something was wrong. His expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly stopped attacking Long Yuan and retreated. But he was still a bit slow. As soon as he dodged Yun Yao's sword light, he was hit by the jet of black water and flew away with a bang. The terrifyingly powerful northern underworld black water pillar shattered his magical energy shield on the spot, shattering the skin all over his body. A jet of dark blood spurted out from his mouth. This result shocked him, and the blood god looked at the demon commander, looked at Black Dragon. They had never imagined that a mere first-level soul refining realm Black Dragon would be able to unleash such a powerful move. This was simply an inconceivable miracle. The ox-head demon commander retreated 1,000 feet away and immediately focused on fighting the demon commander and Yunyao. The demon commander and Yunyao didn't give him a chance to breathe. They rushed over with all their might and launched a storm of attacks. Meanwhile, Ji Tianqing and Tai were locked in a fierce battle with Blood God Sun. The Blood God Sun was sliced into pieces by Ji Tianqing's sword, but it quickly gathered back together and condensed into a 30-meter-tall black giant demon. It looked like a ferocious demonic beast with 4 wings and 2 pairs of sharp claws. There was also a horn on its head, which kept surging with dark red light. It looked extremely evil and powerful. It probably saw that Long Yuan was the most severely injured, and he was the easiest to kill. When it condensed its body again, it appeared at the side of the dragon abyss like a ghost. It released 3 thick ink-black light pillars and blasted toward the dragon abyss. Ji Tianqing and Tai could see that the blood god was very cunning. It wanted to kill Long Yuan first, and then deal with them. Unfortunately, even if they saw through the blood god's intention, it was too late to stop it. Long Yuan sensed that the situation was not good. He dodged 2 jets of black light as fast as he could, but he was still hit by the 3rd jet of black light. Boom! Amidst a deafening boom, Dragon Abyss was struck by the mysterious black beam of light. Its 1,000-meter-long body was blasted back, crashing heavily into a rocky mountain 10 kilometers away. Strangely, the jet of black light didn't destroy its body. Instead, it enveloped its head and rolled violently for a long time. It was only when Dragon Abyss smashed half of the mountain into pieces and fell to the bottom of the sea that Ji Tianqing and Tai realized that something was wrong. Damn it! The Blood God's killer move is an attack on the divine soul. It's over. Long Yuan was already severely injured, and now he's been hit by the Blood God's secret technique. His divine soul must be severely injured. The 2 of them cursed inwardly. They were worried and anxious for Long Yuan. Long Yuan was not dead yet. He fell powerlessly into the pile of rocks. His body twitched violently, but he could no longer get up. His divine soul was in a state of dizziness. It seemed that he could no longer control his dermic powers. Without the suppression of dermic powers, his physical injuries were all exposed. Large amounts of dragon blood gushed out and dyed the surrounding seawater red. The blood god grinned. His body was like a whirlpool, quickly devouring the dragon blood in the seawater and absorbing Long Yuan's power. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing and Tai were so angry that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Murderous intent surged out of their bodies. Blood god! I will kill you today. Demon, you've killed countless people. Even if you kill me 10,000 times, it will not be enough to appease my hatred. Tai roared. His body shone with dazzling golden light. He unleashed all his dermic powers and performed the secret technique of the Golden Dragon tribe. He suddenly opened his giant dragon mouth and spat out a jet of golden fire toward the blood god. That was his golden dragon's breath, and also his most powerful secret technique. After he spat out the dragon breath, whether he could kill the blood god or not, he would suffer a backlash and be powerless for a few months. Ji Tianqing also wielded his broken sword with a murderous aura. From 10 miles away, he viciously stabbed at blood god. Stab! The next moment, the 100-foot-long golden dragon breath hit the blood god. Its gigantic body, which was over 100 feet tall, was instantly pulverized by the dragon's breath and turned into black mist that filled the sky. Then, the sword that Ji Tianqing had thrust out with all his strength also exploded from a dazzling cold light. Boom! Amidst a deafening boom, the cold light exploded and covered the sky, illuminating the sea within a radius of 100 miles. Countless balls of pitch-black demonic mist were shattered into wisps and scattered in the cold seawater. Tai released his most powerful attack and landed at the bottom of the sea weakly. His body flashed with golden light and he returned to his human form. Chapter 1257. Just as Ji Tianqing had expected, the blood god wasn't killed on the spot. As a fiend that was between a devil and a ghost, it was special and powerful. It could be said to be indestructible. Even though Tai's golden dragon breath had hit it and Ji Tianqing's most powerful sword attack had hit it. After it had been blasted into thousands of strands of black qi, it could still gather in the water and quickly condense into a cloud of black mist. However, the blood god didn't know that Ji Tianqing knew the blood god very well and had killed a blood god with his own hands. The moment it reformed its body, Ji Tianqing, who had been accumulating power, suddenly opened the third eye on his forehead. Thunder spiritual eye. Thunder. As he yelled, the golden eye on his forehead released endless thunder power. It gathered into a blue beam of thunder and struck the blood god. The blood god had just reformed its body and wasn't prepared for Ji Tianqing's attack, so it was immediately hit. Boom! Amidst a deafening explosion, the 10-meter-long pillar of lightning struck the blood god with devastating power. At that moment, the dark sea within dozens of miles was illuminated by the dazzling thunder. The blood god's sun was also shrouded by the lightning. The dense black mist quickly collapsed and dissipated under the violent lightning power. Even though they were deep in the sea and the water weakened the power of the thunder, the blood god was still weak. However, the blood god's sun was weak to begin with. He had just reformed his body, so his defense wasn't strong. Ji Tianqing released all the lightning energy stored in his Dharma eye, leaving not a single drop behind. The terrifying power was enough to kill it on the spot. The loud sound echoed in the canyon. The blue lightning flashed crazily in the water and didn't disappear until 10 seconds later. Everything went back to normal after 10 seconds. The lightning disappeared, and so did the extremely dense pitch-black demonic fog. The blood god that had created all kinds of disasters and killed tens of millions of people of the water race was also turned into ashes. The canyon gradually regained its tranquility. Tai stood at the bottom of the sea and stared at the canyon with his eyes wide open. He was shocked and couldn't believe it. Even the Ox-Head Demon Commander, Yunyao, and Black Dragon, who were fighting not far away, stopped fighting. Everyone looked at the empty sea and saw the blood god disappear on the spot. They were all dumbfounded. No one could believe that the blood god, who was as powerful as an overlord at the 5th level of the soul-refining realm, had been killed by Ji Tianqing in one attack. It was definitely a miracle. Only Ji Tianqing knew that he had only been able to kill the blood god because of luck. Before he had arrived at the canyon, the blood god had been fighting with Tai and Dragon Abyss had used a lot of its energy. Plus, he and Tai had both used their ultimate moves to injure the blood god and exhaust him. Most importantly, the Thunder Divine Power was the best power to counter power. Because of this, he was able to kill the blood god with a bolt of lightning at the most appropriate time. While everyone was still in a daze, Ji Tianqing was still clear-headed and calm. He didn't hesitate at all. He held the black sword of burial of heaven and charged at the Ox-Head Demon Commander. He swung his sword and used his ultimate sword technique. Stab sword. He held the broken sword in his hand and thrust it forward. A cold light that had been condensed to the limit flashed in the sea for a moment. When the Ox-Head Demon Commander came back to his senses, his expression changed drastically as he retreated in fear. The blood god was dead and he had lost his biggest support. Of course, he didn't want to fight anymore. However, as soon as he retreated 100 feet away, the dazzling cold light pierced through his protective magic power and armor and exploded in his chest. Boom! A loud, muffled sound erupted and reverberated throughout the canyon, causing everything within 100 miles to tremble incessantly. The dazzling cold light of the sword illuminated an area of 100 miles. It was like a sun at the bottom of the sea, making people unable to open their eyes. As for the Ox-Head Demon Commander, who was at the 4th level of the soul-tempering realm, he had already been crushed by the power of the sword. His muscular body and powerful divine soul had been shattered by the sword light. The earth-shattering sound lasted for a long time before it disappeared. After a dozen breaths of time, the canyon regained its peace, and the battle finally came to an end. Everyone looked at Ji Tianqing, their eyes filled with awe. Of course, other than shock, the eyes of the three surviving elite demon kings were also filled with endless fear. In their minds, the Ox-Head Demon Commander and the Blood God were invincible. They could wipe out the East Sea and kill billions of people. But their goal and ambition had just started. They were defeated before they could achieve it. The Ox-Head Demon Commander and the Blood God had both died in this canyon. Even though they had seen the whole process with their own eyes, they still felt like they were dreaming. It was too unreal. At this moment, Yun Yao and the Black Dragon regained their senses and immediately used their ultimate techniques to kill the three elite demon kings. The battle was over. The crisis of the East Sea had been resolved. Tai Yi looked at Ji Tianqing deeply and gave him a thumbs up. He said with a complicated expression, "Tianqing, you are now unparalleled in the world. Today, you have helped us kill the Blood God and resolved the crisis of the East Sea. The Imperial Court of the Sea will remember your kindness forever." Ji Tianqing nodded calmly and said, "Let's not talk about this. Let's take a look at Long Yuan's injuries first." As he said that, he flew towards Long Yuan. Tai Yi also came back to his senses. He quickly swam to Long Yuan's side through the dark sea. Long Yuan was still lying in the ruins at the bottom of the sea. His 1,000-meter-long dragon body had turned into human form. He was lying on a pile of rubble. Blood was flowing out of his body and he was twitching. His body was covered in a layer of black fog. His divine soul was very weak. His eyes were closed and he was on the verge of death. Tai Yi was worried when he saw his serious injuries. He asked, "Long Yuan, how are your injuries? Are you able to hold on?" Long Yuan tried his best to open his eyes. He looked at Tai Yi and said weakly, "Your Highness, Long Yuan can't protect you anymore. Please take care of yourself, Your Highness." Tai Yi frowned and said worriedly, "Long Yuan, you don't have to say too much. I will take you back to the Imperial Court now and heal you. You have been the commander of the Imperial Court's guards since I was young. You have been protecting me with your life all these years. I will not let you die like this." Ji Tianqing frowned and said, "Tai Yi, it's too late to bring him back to the Imperial Court to heal. Let me try. Maybe I can save him." Long Yuan shook his head and said weakly, "Your Highness, there's no need. My divine soul has been shattered. Even if the gods are here, there's nothing they can do." You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.